Jennifer Brown was born in 1979, radiated positivity and warmth, impacting those around her. Her numerous pursuits often left friends and family wondering how she managed it all, but her true passion was being a mother. Despite having to care for Noah, her son, this has not negatively affected her life. Instead, make Jennifer stronger, especially after Noah was diagnosed with autism as a child. As she cared for Noah, Jennifer became his rock and closest friend. They spent countless hours together, sharing joyful moments and supporting each other through life's challenges. Their heartwarming bond evoked feelings of tenderness and admiration from those who knew them. The small town adored this family for their genuine kindness and cheerful nature. Tragedy struck unexpectedly on January 3, 2023, when Jennifer vanished without leaving behind any clues. On January 4, 2023, Antonio Blair Watts Richardson contacted the Limerick Township Police Department, deeply concerned about his close friend Jennifer's disappearance. Although it had been less than 24 hours since he last saw or heard from her, Antonio's anxiety was growing by the minute. Despite numerous attempts, he couldn't reach Jennifer, which was unusual since she was always responsive, especially when it came to her son Noah. Jennifer's family and friends knew her as a devoted mother and caring person, making her sudden disappearance alarming. Antonio's call to the police initiated a lengthy and mysterious investigation. A massive search effort began, involving police officers, family, and friends, all hoping to find clues about Jennifer's disappearance. The main question on everyone's mind was what could have caused Jennifer to leave her son without explanation. At 4 p.m., Officer Stephen Crawford from the Limerick Township Police Department visited the Brown family home to check on the situation. He observed Jennifer's vehicle parked near the porch. Upon entering the house, he found her keys, purse, tablet, and work cell phone still inside. However, Jennifer's personal cell phone was nowhere to be found. When police attempted to track the phone, they discovered it had been turned off at 7 a.m. on January 4th, and the signal couldn't be traced after that. The last known location of the phone was near the intersection of Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick. This discovery marked the first significant lead in the investigation and indicated that something ominous had occurred. As a result, Jennifer was officially reported missing, and the police launched an investigation. Investigators questioned Jennifer's family, friends, and neighbors, but none of them had any information about her disappearance. Her loved ones, including her Aunt Diane Brem and Jennifer's friends Tiffany Barron and Antonio, were adamant that Jennifer would never leave her son behind. As a devoted mother, she would never abandon her child. Despite efforts, no leads were found in Jennifer's disappearance. Her family appealed to the public and a reward was offered for information, but yielded nothing, leaving unanswered questions and growing anxiety. The police investigation started by examining the events of that day, focusing on Jennifer's close friend Antonio, who was the last person to see her alive. On what seemed like an ordinary January day, Jennifer and Antonio spent time in the living room discussing life, future plans, and their children. As their kids often played together, Jennifer asked Antonio to pick up her son Noah from school. Antonio agreed and headed to the school to get Noah. The next day, however, Noah's behavior at school raised concerns among his teachers. They noticed that he had missed 2 doses of his medication, which was unusual given Jennifer's diligent care for her son's condition. She always kept his teachers informed about his health and any issues that arose at school. The school staff became concerned when they couldn't reach Jennifer. Noah told them Jennifer had gone to the grocery store but hadn't returned. She would never leave her son alone at this time. Antonio also tried to contact her but was unsuccessful. Antonio reported her missing to the police. As the investigation continued, no new information about Jennifer's whereabouts emerged. Hope for her return began to fade with each passing day. It seemed she had vanished without a trace and might never be found. However, on January 18, 2 weeks after her disappearance was reported, 2 warehouse employees in nearby Limmer Township stumbled upon something unusual. They exited the building to grab coffee and stumbled upon what seemed to be a freshly dug hole. Upon closer inspection, they were shocked to find a woman's body buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately notified the police, who promptly arrived at the scene. The body was identified as Jennifer Brown, who had been missing for 2 weeks. The sheriff informed Jennifer's family that her body had been found partially buried near a warehouse in Rosefor. An autopsy revealed that Jennifer's death was caused by asphyxiation, with 3 broken ribs indicating a violent struggle with her killer. The investigation shifted from a missing person case to a murder case. Police re-interviewed Jennifer's family and friends, but these conversations yielded no new leads. The investigation seemed to be reaching a dead end, with no suspects in sight. However, just when detectives thought they had hit a roadblock, an unexpected lead emerged from an unforeseen source. After Jennifer's disappearance and murder were made public, the police asked anyone with relevant information to come forward. Noah's teacher responded to this request. She remembered an incident that initially seemed insignificant but raised serious concerns after Jennifer's death. The teacher reported that Noah shared an important detail about the day Jennifer disappeared. Noah told his teacher that when Antonio picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, he saw his mom's personal cell phone among Antonio's belongings. Noah recognized the phone because the lock screen showed his own childhood photo. This information proved crucial in the investigation into Jennifer's murder. Previously, investigators suspected that Jennifer's killer had taken her phone. Now, Antonio became the main suspect. The police started investigating the relationship between Jennifer and Antonio, uncovering surprising details. Initially, Jennifer and Antonio's friendship appeared strong and enduring. They spent a significant amount of time together, were well acquainted, and their families socialized with one another. However, once the financial dealings between them became known, one that had been concealed behind their seemingly friendly relationship. Antonio owned a restaurant called Bird's Kitchen, which had declined and closed in early 2022. Following this, Antonio sought help from Jennifer in August 2022. To support her friend, Jennifer decided to invest in Antonio's business, helping him reopen Bird's Kitchen in a new location. They signed a contract that required Jennifer to provide regular financial support to sustain the restaurant, making payments approximately every 6 weeks. To rebuild Bird's Kitchen, Jennifer gave Antonio approximately $36,000 from August to January. They agreed she would give him another $99,000. Antonio was supposed to find a new location, pay rent, sign a contract, and reopen the restaurant in January 2023. However, Antonio spent the money on personal needs instead of the business. As a result, the property owners canceled their agreement with him on December 26, 2022, because he failed to meet his financial obligations. This left Antonio in a difficult situation, losing both money and the opportunity to open the restaurant. The police suspected Antonio of committing a crime to save his business due to his desperate situation. Upon investigating Jennifer's iPad, they found 2 unauthorized transfers of $177,000 to Bird's Kitchen on January 3rd. These transfers were not part of the agreement between Jennifer and Antonio, and they initially failed due to 2-factor authentication, which was later disabled. This evidence increasingly implicated Antonio in her murder. Police interviewed the owners of the property where Antonio lived, who had recently terminated his lease. Surprisingly, on January 4th, the same day Antonio reported Jennifer missing, he had met with them, claiming he had the money to sign a new lease. This led investigators to believe that Antonio was likely the killer, but they knew he would not confess easily. They needed concrete evidence to prove his guilt. To gather more information, investigators spoke with Antonio's wife, Tiara Taylor. They asked her about Antonio's whereabouts on the day Jennifer went missing. Tiara told them that Antonio had visited the Brown family at around 1 p.m. on January 3rd and didn't return home until 4:30 a.m. the next morning, when he picked up Noah from the bus stop. She also mentioned that Antonio came home briefly, then left again around 5 p.m. and didn't return until late that night. This timeline became a crucial focus point for further investigation. Further investigation found that Antonio spent the night with his mistress, Tatiana Garrett, and didn't meet her until 8 p.m. This left a 3-hour gap with no alibi. Based on evidence, detectives created a timeline of the murder. According to them, Antonio went to Jennifer's house on January 3rd around 1 p.m. and allegedly killed her while Noah was at school. Antonio then transferred funds from Jennifer's iPad to his account and left to pick up Noah from the bus stop around 4 p.m. Later, he returned to Jennifer's house, dropped off Noah, and went back to dispose of the body. He buried it in a shallow grave in a field near Roseford. Afterwards, he went to Tatiana's house and spent the night. Everything seemed carefully planned, but one mistake led the police to Antonio. The mistake was letting Noah see his mother's cell phone. The police had enough evidence to convict him but investigated further to confirm his guilt. This involved film experts and a trained dog that could detect cadaveric odors indoors. First, the dog was taken to Jennifer's home to familiarize itself with her scent. This was the same location where the crime had occurred, in her kitchen. The police then led the dog to Antonio's car, where it immediately picked up the same scent. This final piece of evidence solidified the detectives' suspicions of Antonio's involvement in the murder. After months of investigation, Antonio was arrested on February 8th and charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and theft. He is currently being held at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without bail, awaiting a preliminary hearing where he will face the law for his alleged crimes. Jennifer's loved ones were devastated by her death, especially since the killer was someone they trusted. Now that the killer has been brought to justice, the case was finally closed. The boy's observation of the killer's mistake played a crucial role in uncovering the truth and bringing the perpetrator to justice. The tragic events in Limer Township serve as a reminder that even the most meticulously planned crimes will ultimately be solved. Cruel and inhumane acts will not go unpunished, and those responsible will face the law. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Roxana Valdez. Roxana Valdez was born in 1957 in a small village in the province of Punta Arenas, Chile. Roxana married a man whose name is not publicly known, and they had a son together. However, the marriage was not successful, and they separated in 2011. As a single mother, Roxana faced significant challenges in her small village, where job opportunities were limited. The community's main occupation was farming and selling produce, and the local schools focused on teaching agricultural skills. Roxana worked at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. Her role was a night supervisor, responsible for ensuring the students' behavior and slept at night. She did not have a direct role in raising the children. Roxana's son attended the same boarding school, as she was unable to care for him during the day due to her work in the fields. At the boarding school where Roxana worked, Claudio Munoz Ramirez was the head of grounds maintenance. His nighttime work schedule led to him meeting Roxana. Despite their 14-year age difference, they discovered they had a lot to talk about. Roxana would often spend entire nights discussing school issues and her failed marriage with Claudio. They also shared commonalities in their personal lives. Claudio had 2 daughters he loved, but he felt disconnected from their mother and had considered divorce multiple times. However, he stayed in the marriage because of a promise he made to her late father. Over time, Claudio seemed to forget his promise and began spending more time with Roxana, away from his family. Eventually, he made a decisive move without explaining himself to his wife. He packed his belongings and left their home to be with Roxana, who happily welcomed him into her life. Their relationship moved forward quickly, but Roxana overlooked some important red flags. She welcomed a man she barely knew into her home, despite having children who needed her attention. As they had enjoyable conversations, Roxana failed to notice that Claudio had a temper and could be cruel. The first major incident occurred at the boarding school, where Claudio was in charge of cleanliness. During a scheduled cleanup day, some students refused to participate, which infuriated Claudio. He threatened to beat anyone who didn't help, despite having no teaching experience. Although it's unclear if he would have followed through on this threat, the students eventually started cleaning. Later, they collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of physical violence. The principal, unhappy with Claudio, asked him to resign voluntarily. This was a significant setback, as the Don Gregorio boarding school was one of the few places in the area that offered stable and decent-paying jobs. After searching for work in fields and at fruit bases, Claudio realized it was a futile effort. He and Roxana decided to look for a better life elsewhere, but they left their son at the boarding school so he could continue his education. They didn't want to take any risks by bringing him along. To avoid relying on employers, who had already let them down, Claudio and Roxana decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They moved to Molina, a commune a couple of hours from the Chilean capital, known for its vineyards and wine exports. Roxana and Claudio bought a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and started their small family business. Claudio took care of purchasing and transporting products, while Roxana handled sales throughout the day. They couldn't afford to hire an employee, as it would add to their expenses, and they worried that someone else might not take care of the perishable goods properly. Claudio became visibly upset and angry when he discovered Roxana was pregnant with their first child. This was a moment that required serious thought, but Roxana, caught up in their new relationship and thriving business, agreed with Claudio's suggestion to give the baby to her relatives to raise after birth. However, Roxana suffered a miscarriage afterwards. Following this, Claudio's behavior changed significantly. He frequently yelled at Roxana and occasionally turned violent. Neighbors, tired of the constant noise, often called the Chilean police, the Carabineros, to intervene in their domestic disputes. One time, when the Carabineros responded to a call, they found Roxana in tears and partially undressed, fleeing the house with Claudio chasing after her. Roxana revealed to the officers that she was suffering from ongoing domestic abuse, which had caused her miscarriage. The incident left her needing psychological support. However, as time went by, they seemed to put their issues behind them and continued living together as if nothing had happened. After the incident, Claudio should have faced charges, but Roxana chose to forgive him and give him another chance. She made him promise that it wouldn't happen again. Although Claudio promised to change, his past behavior with his ex-wife suggested that his words might not be reliable. Sadly, the past repeated itself. Claudio stopped physically abusing Roxana, but he started going out to local bars at night, drinking heavily and spending a lot of their family's money on alcohol and encounters with women. Roxana put up with her husband's behavior, hoping that he would settle down once they had a child. In a way, she was correct. After Roxana gave birth to a healthy child in 2013, Claudio changed his ways. He stopped going out and focused on their business, which was growing and needed more attention. They expanded their business by buying another kiosk and vehicle for transporting products. Roxana also invested in firearms for protection, as they lived and worked in areas that weren't very safe. The family's assets appeared to increase substantially, but this growth was only theoretical. In reality, Claudio resumed his previous habits, wasting money on alcohol and reverting to violent behavior towards Roxana. Roxana's account detailed how the abuse in their relationship escalated. At first, Claudio drank sporadically, but the frequency soon increased. When inebriated, he would return home, accuse Roxana of fictional affairs, and subject her to physical and sexual abuse. His actions seemed intentionally hurtful, even when Roxana was pregnant. This culminated in a miscarriage in August 2012, sending Roxana into a prolonged depression. On one occasion, following his typical routine, Claudio went to a local bar and didn't come back until the next morning. Roxana, accustomed to his behavior, still felt anxious about him. It was later discovered that Claudio had taken 5 million Chilean pesos, equivalent to around $6,000, which Roxana had obtained from selling her mother's house. He spent this money on alcohol and visits to brothels. Roxana was shocked and felt betrayed when she discovered that Claudio had taken the money meant for their shared business, which was hidden in their daughter's room. When Claudio came home late that evening, Roxana confronted him about the missing money. However, Claudio was uninterested in discussing the issue and instead hit Roxana, admitting that he had squandered all the money. This incident was the final straw for Roxana. Without saying a word, she went to their bedroom, retrieved a revolver that was meant for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest. Claudio died instantly. Roxana was surprised by her own drastic action and attempted to stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound, but it was too late. The close-range shot from the .38 caliber revolver was fatal. In her testimony, Roxana expressed deep remorse and acknowledged the immorality of her actions. She confessed that when she retrieved the revolver, her intention was not to intimidate Claudio but to kill him. Roxana remembered the numerous times Claudio abused and assaulted her, and how she failed to report him to the authorities due to fear. She was afraid of being alone, especially after they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxana's main concern was how it would affect their daughter if she were imprisoned and the child was sent to an institution. That night, Roxana decided to get rid of the body and report Claudio missing. She knew the police were aware of his frequent disappearances during drinking binges. As a delicate woman, disposing of the body was a daunting task. She decided to remove it piece by piece, using kitchen knives to cut the limbs and head. The process required 5 knives, as they kept becoming dull. Roxana then boiled the dismembered parts in large pots, all while playing with her young daughter, who was unaware of what her mother was doing and what had happened to her father. Roxana's calculated approach to disposing of the body, while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for her daughter, shows the complexity and desperation of her situation. The day after cooking and cooling the body parts, Roxana packed them into separate plastic containers labeled by body part, hands, legs, head, and torso, and then placed each container into a garbage bag. She loaded the bags into her car and drove to St. Lucia to scatter them on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she cleaned her house thoroughly with bleach. However, upon arriving in St. Lucia, Roxana couldn't bring herself to dispose of the bags, despite finding a suitable location. Roxana was nervous during the drive, constantly feeling like she was being watched and fearing that the police would stop and search her car. This fear escalated into panic, prompting her to devise a backup plan involving her daughter, where she would pretend to rush her to the hospital if stopped by police. She even considered pinching her daughter to make her cry louder and make the situation more believable. Since Roxana couldn't discard the remains, she returned home and hid the bags in the garage. She then cleaned the interior of her car with bleach again and visited Claudio's relatives. She told the police that Claudio had stolen a large sum of money and hadn't been home for days, but they simply shrugged off her claims. Roxana visited her mother and brother, who were alarmed by her condition. She wasn't eating, had a glazed expression, and kept asking the same questions. The only question she answered clearly was about Claudio's absence, claiming he was delayed due to a flat tire while buying goods for their store. Overwhelmed by her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxana broke down and asked her brother for help. When he arrived, she revealed everything and showed him the containers. Her brother was shocked. Roxana wanted to unburden herself and share the traumatic experiences she had with Claudio, but she primarily needed her brother's help to dispose of the containers holding the body. However, her brother refused, fearing he would be implicated as an accomplice and face police involvement. He urged Roxana to confess to the Chilean police, the Carabineros, and threatened to do it himself if she didn't. Disappointed but with no alternative, Roxana decided to cooperate. That night, she went to the 4th police station to make a significant statement. The officers, who knew her, initially assumed she was there to report her problematic husband. However, they were stunned by what she revealed. Roxana was arrested on the spot. News of her arrest spread quickly, drawing numerous journalists to the station. As the journalists waited, Roxana was eventually brought out, visibly distressed and in handcuffs. Before being escorted into a police car, she exclaimed, "I was afraid he would kill me one day." At first glance, the case seemed straightforward. Roxana had confessed, provided evidence, and surrendered voluntarily. Nevertheless, prosecutor Monica Bisos was skeptical of Roxana's easy confession and wanted a more thorough investigation. Prosecutor Bisos asked to extend Roxana's arrest to allow for further forensic examination. The goal was to determine if Claudio was still alive when his body was dismembered, which would have led to a longer sentence for Roxana. The judge agreed to a 60-day detention to continue the investigation. At the same time, Roxana's lawyer, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxana committed the crime under extreme emotional distress. This could have been made worse by postpartum depression and the domestic abuse she suffered. Gutierrez highlighted Roxana's cooperation with the authorities and her voluntary confession as reasons for a more lenient sentence. However, forensic results later showed that Claudio died from a gunshot wound to the chest, disproving the prosecution's theory that he was alive during dismemberment. As a result, the factors that would have increased Roxana's sentence were dismissed. Another lawyer, Juan Pablo Cardenas, pointed out that the gun used in the murder was registered. He also noted that Roxana first reported domestic violence to the police just 20 days after they moved in together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela conducted a medical examination and presented documents to the court showing that Roxana was severely mentally unstable when the crime occurred. This instability, linked to the loss of 2 children, meant she wasn't fully aware of her actions. Additionally, forensic results revealed that Claudio had a high blood alcohol level at the time of his death on April 17, 2015. Roxana's trial began after a year of investigations and evidence gathering. During the trial, Roxana refused to make statements due to her distress over the media portrayal. Prosecutors emphasized the severity of the crime, but couldn't prove premeditation. The defense argued that Roxana acted in self-defense against a man who had brutally mistreated her for years. The court hearing in Chile lasted several weeks, captivating the entire nation. Prosecutor Monica sought a 15-year prison term for Roxana, the accused. After considering the defense and the jury's input, the judges sentenced Roxana to 6 years in a correctional facility with a relatively lenient regime. Claudio's family, who had hoped for a life sentence or even the death penalty for Roxana, were outraged by the court's decision. They had already been upset when the prosecutor requested a 15-year sentence, which they felt was too lenient. The family attempted to downplay any history of domestic violence and claimed that Claudio, a financially independent businessman, would not have stolen $6,000 from Roxana. Additionally, they alleged that Claudio had confided in them about Roxana's threatening behavior, stating that she would often retrieve a revolver from the closet and threaten to kill him. In a press interview, Claudio's sister shifted the blame to the Chilean state, arguing that the country's judicial system is corrupt and fails to deliver justice, as evidenced by the relatively short sentence given to Roxana, which she compared to punishments for minor thefts. Giselle, Claudio's first wife, spoke out in his defense. She stated that Claudio was never violent during their many years together. In contrast, Roxana frequently started arguments due to her jealousy and possessiveness. Roxana was initially imprisoned, but after serving 2/3 of her sentence, she was transferred to a semi-open education center in Tala for good behavior. She was allowed to stay in contact with her daughter and was eventually released early. The media reignited public interest in the case, and many people were outraged by her early release. However, some individuals, despite viewing Roxana as a murderer, believed her actions were justified because they saw her as a victim. The debate surrounding this case continues to this day. This story emphasizes the severe consequences that can occur when domestic violence is not addressed promptly. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carrie Leah Farver. Carrie Leah Farver was born on November 30th, 1974, in Macedonia, Nebraska, USA. As a single mother, she raised her son, Max Maxwell, after experiencing failed relationships in the past. Raising Max was challenging for Carrie. Despite her immense love for her child, she struggled with depression, which led to a period where she spent a month in bed. During this time, her mother, Nancy Rainey, took care of Max. Carrie's difficult relationship with Max's father and unstable living conditions contributed to her mental health issues. At the age of 20, Carrie's struggles led to a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. This condition causes extreme mood swings, ranging from euphoria, increased productivity, and excessive friendliness to depression, bitterness, and feelings of powerlessness. Although bipolar disorder significantly complicates daily life, Carrie's doctor found an effective treatment for her in the early 2000s. With this treatment, Carrie was able to manage her condition and live a relatively normal life. Whether Carrie wanted to settle her personal life is an open question. On one hand, what woman doesn't dream of a suitable partner? On the other hand, why commit to someone who might bring worries and misfortunes? Carrie was raised in a loving family and had an active lifestyle. She played sports and aspired to become a doctor. However, her dreams were cut short during her first medical practice when she fainted at the sight of blood. Deciding not to risk her health or her patients, she pursued a career in programming instead. In the fall of 2012, Carrie received a job offer in Omaha with good prospects and decided to take it. However, her son Max was in middle school and preferred to stay in his familiar surroundings, so he remained with his grandmother in Macedonia. According to Amy, a friend of Carrie's father, Carrie had a radiant smile that drew attention whenever she entered a room. It was likely this quality that caught Dave Kropa's eye when they met at an auto repair shop in November 2012. As Carrie showed him something inside her car, a Ford Explorer, Dave felt an instant attraction. Their first date arrived soon after, but their time together was interrupted by numerous calls and messages from a woman named Liz, who eventually stopped by Dave's apartment to collect something she had left there earlier. Dave told Carrie about his past relationship with Liz, whom he met on a dating site 6 months prior. They had been together for a while, but he ended things because she was extremely clingy. Carrie was understanding and wasn't fazed by Liz's presence in Dave's apartment, recognizing that everyone has past relationships that can resurface. 2 weeks after moving in, Carrie started dating Dave. They had discussed their expectations beforehand and agreed to a brief, casual affair. Liz, whose full name is Shaunana Elizabeth Gollier, was the first person Dave met online in 2012. Dave and Liz had children around the same age. However, Dave felt Liz wasn't a suitable long-term partner due to her limited education and lack of shared interests. Their relationship focused more on physical intimacy than meaningful conversations. Over time, Liz grew increasingly interested in what Dave was doing when she wasn't around, particularly in regards to who he was seeing. However, Dave consistently reminded her that they were in an open relationship, implying that she shouldn't be concerned about his interactions with others. He also reassured her that she had the freedom to date other men if she chose to do so. Despite Dave's openness, Liz couldn't shake off her feelings of dissatisfaction and jealousy, particularly towards Dave's children and their mother, Amy. She struggled to understand the close bond that persisted between Dave and Amy even after their breakup. As a result, Liz's behavior became increasingly possessive, prompting Dave to create distance between them. It was during this period of separation that Carrie entered Dave's life. Carrie was not only beautiful but also stylish, intelligent, and a great conversationalist. Dave found himself lost in conversation with her for hours, feeling an undeniable connection as they shared common interests and perspectives. Liz noticed that Dave was becoming increasingly distant, so she tried to rekindle their connection by sending messages, emails, and making phone calls. However, he had no intention of stopping his interactions with Carrie or anyone else for her sake. Meanwhile, Carrie and Dave were spending more nights together, which was convenient for Carrie's work schedule and enjoyable for Dave. Carrie seemed to be taking things lightly, focusing on having fun and not looking for anything serious. In December 2015, Liz was shot and non-fatally wounded, leading her to suspect who might be responsible and realize she needed to take action. 2 years prior, on November 13, 2012, Carrie had kissed Dave goodbye before he left for work, expecting to see him later. However, that would be the last time they saw each other. At 9:45 a.m. that morning, Dave received a surprising text message from Carrie stating she wanted to move in with him permanently. Dave found this message disconcerting as they had previously discussed and agreed not to rush into a relationship, being happy with their current situation. Dave replied that he wasn't ready for such a change, but Carrie's response was unpleasant and filled with profanity. He was shocked to discover that all of Carrie's belongings were gone from the apartment. This led him to believe she had left him for good. That same day, Carrie also removed him as a friend on Facebook, which seemed like the end of the matter. However, Dave started getting multiple rude texts and emails from Carrie daily, containing curses and threats to ruin his life. Carrie sent a large number of these messages, all of which were aggressive. Uncharacteristically, she also stopped showing up for work, despite being known for her punctuality. Strange messages weren't only sent to Dave but also to her mother and 15-year-old son, Max. She claimed to have found a job in Kansas and planned to take Max with her, but wanted to be alone for the time being due to worries over her failed romance. In May 2013, Carrie posted on Facebook that she'd left of her own free will and was tired of criticism. She wasn't missing her old life but wasn't ready to return home. Carrie asserted her independence as a grown woman, stating that she had the right to leave home if she chose to. She apologized for hurting everyone by leaving abruptly. However, as time passed, Carrie failed to reappear. Her mother became increasingly concerned when Carrie missed important family events, including her own birthday, Max's birthday, and other celebrations. The final indication that something was seriously wrong was when Carrie missed her father's funeral. Liz began receiving messages from Carrie, which were insulting, humiliating, and even threatening. Carrie warned Liz to stay away from Dave. Confused by Carrie's behavior, Liz reached out to Dave, who revealed he was facing a similar situation. Carrie was sending him messages and emails, accusing him of wrongdoing, calling him a liar, and vowing revenge for the pain he allegedly caused her. The messages were sometimes ominous, with Carrie claiming to know what Dave was doing at the moment. The shared experience brought Dave and Liz closer together, but also made Dave feel guiltier about the trouble he had caused. The messages from Carrie grew more menacing and were filled with grammatical errors and illogical content. This was unusual, as Carrie's mother claimed that her daughter had always been a calm person who wrote coherent and well-structured letters and documents. Carrie was known to be meticulous about spelling and writing style. It's possible that she had experienced even more severe mental health issues. Her actions seemed to be driven solely by her uncontrolled mental state. A key indicator of dissociative identity disorder, also known as split personality, is the presence of separate, simultaneous self-consciousness in each ego, each with its own distinct memories, thoughts, behaviors, and inclinations towards specific actions. This might explain Carrie's unusual behavior and altered writing style. Everything suggested she was unstable, which is why the police didn't initially consider her missing, instead focusing on stopping the pursuit of Liz and Dave. They tried to track Carrie's cell phone, but it was unsuccessful due to blocked signals. Meanwhile, Liz and Dave continued to receive hundreds of texts and emails, sometimes simultaneously receiving nasty messages when they were together. Dave and Liz continued dating, but he felt uneasy around her as she became increasingly demanding. Despite claiming to be fine with their no-commitment relationship, Liz's behavior suggested otherwise. Every time Dave tried to end things with Liz, Carrie would start texting him, bonding with him over their shared victimization. This common ground drew Dave and Carrie closer together, causing them to reunite repeatedly. In January 2013, a missing car was surprisingly found in Dave's front yard. However, the fingerprints on the steering wheel didn't match Carrie's, and the car showed no suspicious signs. The police eventually returned the car to Carrie's parents. Carrie continued to message Liz and Dave, escalating her behavior by sending pictures of their children and threatening to harm them unless Dave left Liz alone. As time passed, Carrie's stalking persisted, and Liz's jealousy grew, frustrating Dave. He became exhausted with the events unfolding in his life and eventually found the strength to end his relationship with Liz. This decision came shortly after a tragic incident in August 2013, when Liz reported a fire at her home that resulted in the death of all her pets, including a snake, a cat, and 2 dogs. Liz suspected Carrie was responsible, citing repeated threats made via texts and emails. The incident marked a significant turning point in the case of missing person Carrie Farver, leading to Carrie's placement on a federal wanted list. Tens of thousands of messages were meticulously analyzed. Law enforcement seized cell phones from Dave and Liz, as they believed Dave was also in danger. Someone had vandalized the auto repair shop where he worked and thrown a brick through his window. It appeared that Carrie's anger was directed at anyone in Dave's life. Consequently, Amy Flora, Fave's ex-wife, began receiving threatening messages from Carrie. As Dave spent time with his children, he also saw Amy regularly. The police were perplexed as to why Carrie, who had dated Dave for less than 2 weeks, was now stalking Dave and his ex-wife. The investigators decided to focus on Dave Coupa, as Carrie's disappearance raised many questions that needed to be answered. It was a mystery that didn't add up. Carrie Farver's family was also tirelessly searching for her, exploring every possible lead to find her. Their efforts finally paid off in the spring of 2015, when detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty took on the case. Unfortunately, they found no evidence that Carrie was still alive. One of the detectives shared their thoughts with ABC News. It's unusual for adults to suddenly leave without using any money. No one saw or heard from her, which doesn't make sense. She had a good income and a nice home. I've come to believe that I have no proof she's alive. With the help of a digital forensics expert, the detectives analyzed data from Kropa and Gore's phones from 2013. Kawa discovered that Carrie had sent over 50,000 texts and 15,000 emails to Dave in just 3 years. Whoever was impersonating Carrie became increasingly sophisticated, trying to hide their IP address and true identity. Somebody with expertise in computer programs seemed to be behind the strange occurrences. In December 2015, Liz Gard contacted the police again, this time reporting that she had been shot in the leg on her own doorstep. She claimed her attacker was Amy Flora, not Carrie. Coincidentally, Dave was missing a gun that Amy may have had access to. This new development raised suspicions that Amy might be involved in Carrie's disappearance. The investigation uncovered a lead that suggested Amy's motive. She may have been seeking revenge against women connected to Dave Krupp. Amy's relationship with Dave had been complicated, and the presence of other women in his life might have prevented them from reuniting. The police promptly questioned Amy, but surprisingly, she had a solid alibi. Multiple witnesses confirmed that she was not at Liz's house when the shooting occurred, so no arrest was made. The investigation became increasingly puzzling. New details emerged from the analysis of Liz's cell phone data. Investigators found fake email addresses using variations of Farver's name and an app used to schedule messages. This discovery shed light on how Liz and Dave received simultaneous messages from Carrie. The investigation led to suspicion of Liz Gollier, which intensified when her fingerprint matched those on Carrie's car steering wheel. It was now clear who the culprit was, and the priority was to prevent further harm. To catch Liz off guard, detectives devised a plan to create a fake narrative, pretending to still consider Amy the prime suspect, aiming to prevent Liz from escaping or destroying evidence. Liz fell for the trap. She was thrilled at the opportunity to eliminate another rival who was threatening her relationship with Dave. Soon after, Liz Gollier gave the police an email supposedly written by Amy. The email included a confession to kidnapping Carrie, along with specific details about the crime. According to the confession, Carrie had been stabbed in the stomach or chest area before her body was disposed of. The email also revealed information about Carrie's car and home that had not been publicly disclosed. According to an investigative spokeswoman, Liz provided detectives with information that only someone intimately involved in the crime could have known. In doing so, she inadvertently implicated herself in Carrie Farver's murder. The letter made it clear that the crime occurred in a car, prompting authorities to re-examine the victim's vehicle. Upon removing the seat covers and fabric, specialists discovered a blood stain belonging to Carrie Farver. Liz managed to send messages posing as Carrie without arousing suspicion, but it's unclear how. Reports suggest that Liz Gollier led a double life, dating both Dave and a man named Garrett. Notably, Garrett's IP address was linked to messages sent under Carrie's name. When questioned, Garrett revealed that he had been in a long-term relationship with Liz. Out of kindness, Garrett invited Liz to move in with him and his children after a fire. However, their relationship became complicated and deteriorated significantly once they started living together. Garrett would often take care of Liz's children while she isolated herself in her room or left the house. Garrett was shocked by what the police told him. It was discovered that Liz spent 40 to 50 hours a week pretending to be a missing woman. Although her room was messy, no significant evidence was found. However, investigators did discover several cell phones and electronic devices in the last place she stayed. In late December 2016, Shaunana Liz was charged with first-degree murder. The county prosecutor commented on the complexity of the investigation, stating that most murders are dark, but this crime was particularly bizarre. It would take some convincing to make someone believe it actually happened. Liz's actions, including letting her dog die in a fire she set herself and shooting herself in the thigh, were attempts to deflect suspicion from herself. Liz's attorney, James Martin Davis, believed the case against her was weak since it was largely based on circumstantial evidence. Key pieces of evidence were missing, including Carrie's body and the crime weapon, and Liz had not confessed to the crime. In fact, there was no conclusive proof that Carrie was even dead. The defense team requested a mistrial, which would allow a judge to determine the extent of Shanana's guilt. The prosecution presented a substantial amount of complex electronic evidence, as well as physical evidence. They argued that the amount of blood found on the passenger seat of Carrie's car supported the theory that she had been stabbed. Investigators also found a direct link between Shanana and Carrie's murder by analyzing a memory card that Shanana had used around the time Carrie went missing. The memory card, which was found in a tablet stored at Dave's residence, contained deleted images. It was clear that the foot belonged to a people who had been deceased for several years. Notably, Carrie had a similar tattoo among her distinguishing features. Her mother later confirmed that the tattoo indeed belonged to Carrie. The photo solidified the conviction of Shanana Liz was predator. The judge ruled her guilty of first-degree murder and handed down a life sentence without parole, stating that Carrie Farver did not disappear by choice but was tragically murdered. Authorities suspect that Shanana murdered Carrie, allowed her body to decompose, and then burned the remains to eliminate all evidence. Motivated by jealousy, she decided to eliminate her rival. After disposing of Carrie, Shanana took her cell phone and used it to send messages that would make Farver appear unstable and win back Dave's favor. When this plan succeeded, Shanana wanted to eliminate Amy as well, but she became too entangled in her own scheme and ultimately fell into her own trap. Shanana, also known as Liz, was also found guilty of arson for setting fire to her own home in August 2013 and attempting to blame it on Carrie. The fire destroyed the house and killed pets, resulting in an additional 20-year prison sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women, despite maintaining her innocence. Dave revealed that he received thousands of emails and text messages signed by Carrie over the years. However, he claimed that he never noticed Carrie stalking him during their relationship, which contrasts with his experience with Shanana. So, what happened to Carrie's son, Maxwell Farver? According to his LinkedIn profile, he followed in his mother's footsteps and became a computer programmer. He graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in software engineering and data science, and is now married. Although it's unlikely he's forgotten the past, he may have found some peace with his new family. As for Dave Kropa, he now lives a private life, away from the public eye. He doesn't have a public account on any social media platform. This disturbing crime story is a harsh reminder of the complexities and manipulation that can occur in human relationships. It highlights how vulnerable we can be in our own surroundings, unaware of the true nature of those around us. Years have passed since Alyssa Burkett's life was tragically cut short. Her daughter Willow has grown up in a loving family, surrounded by the care of her grandparents. Each year on Alyssa's birthday, they visit her grave, remembering her beauty, kindness, and boundless love. The memory of Alyssa lives on in the hearts of her loved ones, in every beat of little Willow's heart. And while the pain of loss will never fade, they know Alyssa will always be with them in their thoughts, actions, and hopes for a better future. Her story is a sad but important reminder of how fragile life is, and how important it is to appreciate loved ones while they are close by. Alyssa Ann Burkett was born on the 31st of December 1995 in Mesquite, Texas, to Teresa Ann Burkett and Joshua Forsyth. She had 3 sisters, Nikki, Madison, and Taylor, and 2 brothers, Landon and Tyler. From a young age, Alyssa displayed creative inclinations. At the age of 7, she dreamed of becoming a fashion designer and crafting her own clothing. She enthusiastically sketched designs for future outfits. Her grandfather, Russell Forsyth, a songwriter, encouraged his granddaughter's passion and hoped she would continue his legacy. However, at the age of 13, Alyssa changed her plans and decided to pursue a career in law. She explained to her grandfather that she enjoyed arguing and felt a calling in it. Russell supported his granddaughter's choice, albeit warning about the necessity of diligent study on this path. After graduating from Royce City High School, Alyssa enrolled in a local college. At 18, she discovered she was expecting a child with her boyfriend, Andrew Bird, who was 9 years her senior. This unplanned pregnancy caught Alyssa off guard and compelled her to reassess her life plans. Alyssa parted ways with Andrew, deciding to raise her daughter on her own. She dropped out of college and dedicated herself entirely to motherhood. On the 31st of December 2019, her 24th birthday, Alyssa gave birth to a healthy baby girl whom she named Willow. Despite the challenges, Alyssa strived to be an exemplary mother. Her relatives noted that she wanted to provide her daughter with a stable and loving family, a privilege she was deprived of in her own childhood due to her parents' divorce. On her social media platforms, Alyssa appeared vivacious and open. She shared family photos, thoughts, and interests. Those close to her described her as straightforward, energetic, with a heart of gold and a radiant smile. Alyssa worked tirelessly to provide for her daughter. She was an assistant at a real estate firm and an employee at a management company. At the time of her demise, she was working at Greentree, a residential real estate company. She was stubborn, determined, sometimes selfish, but you couldn't stay mad at her for long. She had eternal beauty and charm, reminisced her grandfather Russell. He and the entire family were devastated when Alyssa's life tragically ended at the age of 24. Alyssa Burkett met Andrew Bird in her teenage years. He was 9 years her senior and appeared as a mysterious, bad boy. Despite the protests of her relatives, Alyssa began to court him. The relationship was unstable and complex. Bird did not work and relied on Alyssa for support, yet he was possessive, causing scenes and monitoring every move of the young woman. Friends advised her to break up with him multiple times, but she always returned. In January 2019, 23-year-old Alyssa discovered she was pregnant with Bird's child. She decided to keep the baby, although she doubted Andrew as a future father. Eventually, she left him, choosing to raise her daughter on her own. On December 31st, 2019, Alyssa gave birth to a girl named Willow. With the help of her family, especially her grandparents, she tried to provide her daughter with a peaceful childhood and kept Baird away, deeming him unreliable. However, Baird was unwilling to back down. He initiated a fierce legal battle for custody of Willow, declaring he would achieve his goal at any cost, stating that nothing will stop him. Alyssa feared retaliation from his side. In April 2020, just 4 months after Willow's birth, a new woman entered Andrew's life, 22-year-old Holly Elkins. Elkins quickly moved in with Bird and began making plans for their life together and raising his daughter. The appearance of the young stepmother only intensified the conflict. Elkins saw Alyssa as a rival and actively sought to eliminate her from Bird's life. She positioned herself as the perfect mother for Willow. Alyssa felt a growing threat from her ex-boyfriend and his fiancée, GC. Friends advised her to be cautious and wary of the worst. Little did she know that her life would soon be cut short by their hands. Shortly after Andrew Bird and Holly Elkins started their relationship, they launched a full-scale campaign to persecute Alyssa Burkett. Their aim was to completely destroy her reputation and strip her of parental rights to gain full custody of Bird's daughter, Willow. In her messages, Elkins openly expressed her obsession with removing Alyssa as a mother. She wrote to Bird that Alyssa controls him, puts him first, and that he must show his submission to his ex and deal with this mess. Elkins insulted Alyssa, calling her a liar, stupid, and a bad mom. She instigated Bird, claiming that Alyssa stood in the way of their happy family life with Willow and urged him to take radical actions. One instance of slander was not enough for Elkins. Together with Bird, they installed a GPS tracker on Alyssa's car, monitoring her every move. Elkins then anonymously called 911, falsely reporting Alyssa for allegedly driving erratically, trying to discredit her to the police. Another time, Elkins went to the police and falsely accused Alyssa's mother of attacking her. To corroborate her story, she even deliberately scratched her own chest. The couple hired a private detective to find dirt on Alyssa and her new partner. Although the investigator found nothing incriminating, Bird and Elkins persisted. In September 2020, They themselves planted drugs and unregistered weapons in Alyssa's car and anonymously informed the police that Alyssa was allegedly dealing drugs from her trunk. During questioning, Alyssa tearfully insisted she had no involvement with drugs. She immediately suspected Bird's involvement, trying to tarnish her in the eyes of child services and the police. Unfortunately, she couldn't prove it. The persecution took on an increasingly menacing tone. A week before the murder, Elkins wrote to Bird, "I hope you can handle this." She demanded that he go or die for her, clearly hinting of the impending crime. Unbeknownst to herself, Alyssa was in mortal danger. She had only a few days left to live. Following direct instructions from his fiancée GCE Holly Elkins, Andrew Bird began the direct preparation for the murder of Alyssa Burkett. They acted deliberately and methodically, planning every detail of the crime. On September 10, 2020, just 3 weeks before the tragedy, Elkins accompanied Bird to a sporting goods store. There, he purchased a black raincoat in cash, which he would later use in the attack. Elkins clearly assisted him in selecting suitable attire for the crime. On September 14th, they visited a pharmacy, where Elkins bought dark foundation and other cosmetics for makeup. Evidently, she planned to disguise Bird to hinder his identification by witnesses. Later, the police would find this makeup in Bird's car, along with wipes containing traces of makeup. On September 19th, the couple visited a hardware store, where they bought shotgun shells and a large Camillus knife. It was this shotgun and knife that Bird would soon use to carry out his vengeance on the mother of his daughter. Over the past week of September, Elkins inundated Bird with messages, goading him to put the plan into action. She wrote that they needed to deal with this, go or die. Elkins explicitly stated that their relationship would be at risk if he did not follow through to the end. Receiving a clear signal, Bird got down to business. The search history on his phone shows that he began looking for information on how to remove gunpowder residue from his hands after a shot. He clearly did not want to leave any traces. 6 days before the attack, Bird bought a used black Ford Expedition advertised. He planned to use it for surveillance on Alyssa and his transportation to the crime scene. The seller later identified Bird as the buyer. A day before the attack, Bird attached a homemade silencer to his .22 caliber pistol. Although he ultimately did not use it in the attack, the mere fact of making the silencer demonstrates the purposefulness of his actions. Finally, on the morning of October 2nd, Bird disguised himself as an African American, donned a black raincoat, and headed to Alyssa's house in a parked SUV nearby. Thanks to Elkins's messages, he knew the victim's daily routine and could anticipate where to find her. The plan was set. Bird and Elkins had considered all the details. They were prepared to ruthlessly execute the mother of 1.5-year-old Willow in broad daylight. There was no turning back. On the morning of October 2nd, 2020, nothing foreshadowed the tragedy. 24-year-old Alyssa Burkett, as usual, dropped off her 1.5-year-old daughter Willow at her grandmother's and headed to work at the Green Tree Homes Management Company in Carrollton. She parked her car in front of the office around 9 a.m. and was about to enter the building. At that moment, a black SUV sped towards her car at full speed. A man in a black cloak with a hood and a mask covering his face jumped out of it to call for help. A bloody trail followed her. Noticing the movement, Bird swiftly turned around. He pulled out a large hunting knife from under his cloak and lunged towards Alyssa, writhing on the ground. Grabbing her by the hair, he viciously began stabbing her in the neck, chest, and abdomen. In total, Bird inflicted no fewer than 13 stab wounds. From the injuries sustained, Alyssa died on the spot. When her colleagues, hearing the screams, rushed out to the parking lot, they found Alyssa in a pool of blood, her throat slashed. They tried to perform CPR, but in vain. By that time, Bird had already fled in his black SUV, leaving the bloodied knife on the parking lot. Random witnesses described the assailant as a tall, muscular man dressed in all black, with a mask or hood on his head. Many mistook him for an African American. At the time of the attack, Holly Elkins, according to her own words, was at home with Bird's daughter Willow. Thus, she had an alibi. Later, she told the police that Bird allegedly was with her all this time, which turned out to be a lie. The brutal daylight murder in a crowded place shocked the residents of Carrollton. They were puzzled about the motives of the criminal. However, Alyssa's relatives and friends immediately suspected Andrew Bird. They were aware of the protracted conflict between the former partners and feared the worst. Alyssa's mother, barely holding back tears, informed the police of her suspicions regarding Bird. She recounted his threats and obsession with her daughter, the prolonged legal battle for custody of her granddaughter. According to her, Bird had repeatedly stated that the living Alyssa Willow would not get. Thus began one of the most shocking and resonant trials in the history of Texas, a trial that made local residents rethink, seemingly, the familiar issue of domestic violence and stalking. The name of Alyssa Burkett will long be remembered as a symbol of maternal love and resilience in the face of cruelty. The investigation into Alyssa Burkett's murder began with questioning witnesses of the crime scene. Alyssa's colleagues detailed the appearance and actions of the assailant. Although he wore a mask, his tall stature and muscular build stood out. Some mistakenly took him for an African American. The testimonies of Alyssa's relatives about the prolonged conflict with her former partner, Andrew Bird, immediately make him the prime suspect. Friends and colleagues of Alyssa spoke of his obsession, constant surveillance, and threats. Alyssa's new boyfriend recalled that Bird mentioned their full home addresses, although they had not disclosed this information to him. Detectives began surveillance of Bird's house in Rowlett. Soon they noticed Bird, accompanied by his fiancée CE Holly Elkins and daughter Willow, carrying suitcases and bags out of the house, clearly preparing to leave for a long time. When Bird got into the car, the police stopped him on the pretext of lacking a license plate. During the search of the car, men's boots cut into pieces and soaked in bleach were found. Also discovered were remnants of camouflage makeup, napkins with makeup, and burnt parts of a brush for its application. In Baird's house, detectives found even more evidence. Primarily batteries for GPS trackers that the criminal attached to the cars of Alyssa and her boyfriend. There was also a homemade silencer for a pistol and a whole arsenal of weapons. But the main discovery was a written script that Bird used when calling the police to report drugs in Alyssa's car. The police seized 3 phones from Baird, including a disposable one. In the search history of one of them, there were inquiries on how to remove gunpowder residue from hands. He was clearly trying to cover his tracks. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the city, an abandoned black Ford Expedition SUV was discovered. In the cabin, forensic experts found Alyssa's blood and fibers of a fake beard with Andrew's DNA. The car seller identified Bird as the buyer and remembered that he paid in cash and was in a hurry. Forensic examination revealed that the bullet that killed Alyssa was fired from the sawed-off shotgun found in the car. Bird's fingerprints were also found on the handle of a hunting knife. His handwriting was clearly identifiable in the GPS devices and in the calls with false accusations. It seemed that the prosecution had gathered comprehensive evidence of Andrew Bird's guilt. However, the prosecutors also aimed to hold his accomplice, Holly Elkins, accountable. Electronic correspondence between them came to the rescue, showing Elkins' role in planning and inciting the crime. The investigation lasted for several months. During this time, the prosecution meticulously assembled a mosaic of evidence, unequivocally incriminating the ruthless killers of Alyssa Burkett. The jurors were shocked by the cynicism and calculated nature of the criminals. They eagerly awaited the start of the trial to deliver a just verdict. The trial for the murder of Alyssa Burkett began in June 2022, almost 2 years after the tragedy. Sitting in the dock were 35-year-old Andrew Bird and his 23-year-old fiancée, Holly Elkins. They were charged with stalking, conspiracy, and first-degree murder. From the outset, the prosecutors made it clear that they intended to seek the maximum punishment for both defendants. In their opening statement, they painted a picture for the jurors of a massive conspiracy to take the life of the young mother. The correspondence between Baird and Elkins left no doubt about the meticulous planning of the crime. A key prosecution witness was Christopher Mayo, Alyssa's boyfriend at the time of her death. He told the jurors about months of harassment and persecution orchestrated by Bird and Elkins against them. According to him, Alyssa had mentioned multiple times that Bird seemed like someone capable of killing her. Mayo recounted the phone threats, constant surveillance, and attempts to discredit Alyssa in the eyes of social services and the police. He stated that Elkins was the puppet master, directing Bird's actions. Her pathological jealousy and obsession with another's child ultimately led to the tragedy. Colleagues and friends of Alyssa shared the grief of the slain mother. Alyssa had confided in them, expressing fear of her unstable ex, feeling constantly watched. A few days before her death, she told a friend, "If something happens to me, know that Andrew did it." Forensic experts presented the jurors with a rich arsenal of physical evidence, unequivocally linking Bird to the crime scene. In addition to DNA and fingerprints on the murder weapons, there were traces of gunpowder and disguise fragments in his house and car. However, the nail in the coffin of the trial was the electronic correspondence between Bird and Elkins, eloquently demonstrating their joint plans. Phrases like, "I hope you can handle this, do it or die for me." This B** teach must disappear littered their messages in the days leading up to the murder. Bird's defense attempted to argue for the lack of premeditation in his actions. Supposedly, he only intended to scare his ex, but in a fit of rage, miscalculated his force. The defense emphasized the emotional distress and stress from the prolonged legal battle, but the correspondence in meticulous preparation for the crime completely refuted these speculations. Particularly telling were Bird's internet searches on removing gunpowder traces. Such actions do not align with those of someone who accidentally turned to violence. Elkins outright denied her involvement, citing an alibi. However, even here, her position was woven with white lies. Messages where she urged her partner to deal with the rival literally put a nail in the coffin of her innocence, at least in incitement. In the end, Bird admitted guilt on the main points. Apparently, he decided to mitigate his fate, avoiding a life sentence. He detailed, albeit quite impassively, the circumstances of the murder, his preparation, and motives. His key motive was an obsession with Willow, his daughter. Elkins stood her ground to the end. Even after the guilty verdict, she continued to proclaim her innocence and the injustice of the sentence. However, this did not help her escape a harsh punishment. In May 2023, the judge pronounced the verdict. Andrew Bird received 43 years in prison, effectively a life sentence. Holly Elkins was sentenced to 20 years for complicity. The courtroom erupted in applause. Justice, albeit delayed, prevailed. The killers of Alyssa Burkett received their due. The loved ones of Alice, with tears in their eyes, expressed gratitude to the prosecutors and jurors. "Nothing will bring back our girl, but we are thankful that the guilty have been punished, and no one else will suffer at their hands," said Alice's mother to the journalists. This tragedy will serve as a bitter lesson for all victims of domestic violence for a long time. The untimely and cruel death of Alice Burkett shook the residents of Texas and the entire America. A young mother, beloved daughter and sister, she was killed in the most despicable and inhumane manner by the hands of her former partner and the father of her child. Her story became a tragic symbol of the epidemic of domestic violence, claiming thousands of lives annually. Despite the just verdict for the killers, Alice's family does not hide. Their loss is irreplaceable. "She was a ray of light in our lives," recalls her mother Teresa. Determined, with a huge loving heart, she lived for her daughter and dreamed of giving her the best. Most painful was the fact that Alice sensed the danger and repeatedly reported it to her loved ones and the police. Alas, no one took her words seriously until it was too late. Perhaps more decisive intervention could have prevented the tragedy. "She told me, 'Mom, he will kill me. I know. But what could I do?' The police shrugged, saying, 'Until he does something, we are powerless,'" Alice's Aunt Shelley shares in tears. Particular concern arises for Alice's daughter, 2-year-old Willow. She lost her mother at such a tender age and will surely not fully grasp the extent of her loss for a long time. Custody of the girl was granted to her maternal grandparents. They vowed to do everything to ensure Willow grows up in love and never forgets her mother. Every day I show her photos of Alice, tell her how wonderful she was. Willow is still young, but she already reaches for the pictures, caressing them with her finger. Despite everything, we will continue to live on. For her, says Alice's grandmother, Teresa Ann. Alice's story raises uncomfortable yet critically important questions. Why do signals of domestic violence victims often go unnoticed? How can we improve the protection and response system to complaints? What prevents us all from being more vigilant about the problems of friends and family? Experts urge early recognition of warning signs of abusive relationships, pathological jealousy, control, isolation from friends and family, outbursts of aggression. Victims need to know they are not alone and can seek help at any time by contacting hotlines or crisis centers. The most important thing is not to remain silent, not to tolerate, not to consider it normal. Violence is never acceptable, and it rarely stops on its own. Alice was strong, but even the strong sometimes need help, emphasizes psychologist Anna Byers, leading a support group for abuse survivors. Alice's death should not be in vain. Her case once again shows how important it is to take threats and signs of violence seriously, especially when the well-being of children is at stake. No family drama is worth a lost life. The name of Alice Burkett will forever remain in the memory of her loved ones and fellow citizens. Her photos and posts on social media continue to gather likes, comments, and words of support even years after the tragedy. Many see in her an example of resilience and dedication to loved ones despite all trials. Rest in peace, dear Alice. You will forever remain in our hearts. We will continue your work and love Willow as you loved her. Justice has prevailed, and now you can rest peacefully. We will always remember your goodness, willed her grandfather Russell on the first anniversary of her death. Perhaps someday in the future, Willow will be able to read these words and learn what an amazing woman her mother was. A woman who fought for her until her last breath and did not let her love fade, even in the face of monstrous cruelty. Her short but bright life will forever be an example for all mothers. Alice Burkett's story is not just another criminal chronicle. It is a tragedy of a young woman who only wanted one thing, to love and raise her daughter, but her life was cut short by those who vowed to protect her. Her child's father and his new partner. Obsession, jealousy, desire for control, these were the true motives driving Andrew Bird and Holly Elkins. Neither pleas from Alice, nor fear of the law, nor thoughts of the well-being of little Willow stopped them. In pursuit of a sick passion, they crossed the final line. The most frightening thing is that Alice's case is just the tip of the iceberg. Hundreds of women across the country face domestic violence, harassment, and threats daily. Many are afraid to speak openly about it, considering their burden shameful. Unfortunately, the outcome of this silence can be fatal. Alice's example reminds us we must not turn a blind eye to signs of abuse in our own lives or the lives of our loved ones. Pathological jealousy is not love. Constant control is not care. And outbursts of aggression are not character. These are warning bells, SOS signals that cannot be ignored. If you have become a victim of domestic violence, know that you are not alone. There are people and organizations ready to lend a helping hand. Do not be afraid to take this step. Do not wait until the situation becomes deadly. Your safety and right to a life without fear are paramount above all other considerations. It is our collective responsibility to raise the younger generation in respect and acceptance, to teach them to resolve conflicts with words, not fists or guns, to explain that love does not tolerate violence. Perhaps then our daughters will no longer perish at the hands of those they once let into their hearts. I don't know if Willow will ever understand why and for what her mother died, but I know for sure Alice loved her more than life. Her last thoughts were surely about her daughter. And there, in the heavens, she continues to watch over her little one, said her brother Landon at her funeral. Someday Willow will grow up and be able to read this story herself, the story of her mother's life, love, and struggle. May the memory of Alice be a source of strength and faith in a better future for her. And for all of us, a bitter lesson, a reminder, and a call to action. We owe it to her, we owe it to each other. In this episode, we'll discuss the events that occurred in 2014. 31-year-old Carly McBride disappeared under mysterious circumstances after visiting her ex-boyfriend's house. After receiving a missing person report, the police began an investigation. However, it took the authorities almost 2 years to answer the question, where did Carly disappear to? Carly was born on April 14, 1983, in the family of Steve McBride and Lorraine Williams. She was a cheerful and outgoing child with a close relationship with her parents. Growing up, Carly started experiencing more and more problems. She started abusing alcohol and illegal substances. Nevertheless, she made efforts to overcome these harmful addictions. In 2014, Carly was a 31-year-old woman that lived in Belmont, New South Wales, Australia. She was a mother of 2 children, 7-year-old son William and 3-year-old daughter Cadence. Carly's children were from different men, but I couldn't find any specific information about her relationship with her former partners. However, we know that Andrew Easton, Cadence's father, was one of the last people to see Carly. In 2013, Carly checked into a rehabilitation center to overcome her addiction to illegal substances. While there, she met Sale Kenneth Newson, the friendship with whom gradually grew into something more. From August 2014, Carly and Sale started spending almost all their time together. The couple had fights sometimes, but they seemed to be happy on the surface. On September 30th, 2014, Sale took Carly to Muswell Brook, where her 3-year-old daughter Cadence lived with her father, Andrew Easton. Carly came to stay with her for a few hours. She entered the house of her former partner at about 12:30 p.m. Sale didn't stay with her, but they agreed he would return in a few hours. However, when Sale came to pick up Carly, she was no longer there. Carly's ex-partner, Andrew Easton, said they fought, so Carly left. She planned to go to the nearest McDonald's, located about a 20-minute walk from Andrew Easton's house. Puzzled that Carly didn't call to tell him where she would be waiting for him, Sale started calling her himself. Since all attempts were unsuccessful, Sale drove towards McDonald's, where she allegedly planned to go. Along the way, he looked around, hoping to find Carly sitting somewhere waiting for him. He suggested her phone was dead, but Carly was nowhere to be seen. She wasn't at McDonald's, where she supposedly went, or anywhere near it. Sale drove around the streets of Muswell Brook for a while, but it was in vain. Carly seemed to disappear into thin air. When she didn't return home to Belmont that evening, Sale contacted the police. The detectives asked him the details of what had happened. It would be exactly the same thing every time. I would drop her off, she would get out and go to the front door, she would have her daughter in her arms and turn around and wave me off, Newson said. She would ring me twice and text me twice every visit to let me know she was okay. But on that day, I dropped her off about 12:30 p.m. and things were just different, and I didn't hear from her again. Not a thing. I texted her, I called her, but the phone just rang out. Newson said he turned up at the house about 4:30 p.m. as usual to pick up Carly, only to be told by her ex that she had left after an argument earlier that afternoon and headed on foot towards a McDonald's restaurant about 1 mile away. Undoubtedly, the following question arose. Did Carly leave her ex-partner's house, or Andrew Easton was hiding something? His story suggested he was the last person to see her. However, no other witnesses could confirm that Carly really left his house. Police interviewed neighbors and people living along the route Carly would have taken if she had gone to McDonald's. The fact that no one saw her has further increased suspicions about her former partner. Unfortunately, no surveillance cameras near Andrew Easton's house could confirm or deny his words about Carly leaving around 2 p.m. After reviewing the recordings from the surveillance cameras at McDonald's, the investigators found no evidence she was ever there. Police searched fields behind a nearby residential area for clues. However, a chief investigator of this case said nothing particularly remarkable had been found, adding that the investigation would continue. They urged anyone with information about the disappearance of Carly McBride to contact the police department. She was last seen wearing blue jeans, sandals, and a yellow t-shirt, and she was carrying a tan handbag. After obtaining a search warrant, the police examined the house where Carly was seen last. A group of police officers went there, hoping to find clues that could shed some light on what happened to the mother of 2 children. But after searching Andrew Easton's house, The police did not find new clues. Nothing there indicated that someone committed a crime in that house. However, investigators did find something suspicious. They discovered Carly's Facebook account got deleted a few hours after she vanished, before the official report of her disappearance. This mysterious deletion of her account on a social network raised a lot of questions. Are the account deletion and Carly's disappearance somehow connected? Was she the one to delete her account, or did someone else do it? Why was the account deleted? Perhaps the Facebook messages could tell about what happened, and that's why someone deleted the account. To get answers to these questions, the detectives turned to the U.S. Department of Justice, hoping the latter would help restore Carly's account and determine who could have deleted it. Facebook data analysis is done at the company's headquarters in Menlo Park, California, but Sergeant Wright said Ms. McBride's Facebook friends could help New South Wales police. We're asking if anyone may have been in contact with Carly via Facebook or any other social media in the days leading up to her disappearance, if anyone noticed anything unusual, if they could come forward and let us know, he said. Given the timing of the Facebook page being shut down, and in the context of the disappearance, we think it's hugely suspicious, but it's also something that could hold some vital information about what happened to Carly. Carly's parents didn't believe their daughter had just fled to start a new life. Close friend and flatmate Kylie Smith said nothing appeared out of the ordinary as she spoke with Carly on the phone as she traveled to Muswell Brook. She was so down to earth. I would call her a free spirit. She was easygoing. She just loved life, Miss Smith said. She was always there for her friends. If you were having a bad day, she just knew, and she would be in contact. And she also made a plea. We all wake every day not knowing what happened, not knowing where she is, she said. You have to have a conscience. Come forward with some news. Just give us something. The police thoroughly searched the area where Carly was before her disappearance. The search included dogs, police divers examining the Hunter River and its surroundings, and aerial and trail bike patrols. And yet none of this helped to find any traces of Carly McBride. Months passed, but the investigation did not bring any results. Carly didn't leave any digital footprints. After she disappeared, she never turned on her phone. Her social media accounts were inactive, and she did not use bank cards. Investigators began to assume that Carly was no longer alive. 9 months after Carly's disappearance, her parents sought help finding their daughter. They were joined by Detective Timothy Seymour, who could contribute by requesting any information helpful to the case. Ms. McBride's mother, Lorraine Williams, shed tears during the public appeal and begged for help to find her beloved daughter. If you know anything, even if it's the smallest thing, please come forward and help us, she said. Steve and Lorraine said their family experienced difficulties after Carly's disappearance. We are coping the best we can, Mr. McBride said. As far as Carly's children are concerned, it's a fairly complex area. Both children have 2 different fathers, and to be honest, we haven't had too much close contact with those children. So we're just hoping that changes so we can have further contact with them. Detective Inspector Timothy Seymour said officers had worked tirelessly since Ms. McBride's disappearance. We have a plethora of information that we are sorting through, however we are still appealing again, Inspector Seymour said. The breakthrough moment may come from somebody who might think they have an innocuous piece of information. Over time, Carly's parents started realizing that they would probably never see their daughter alive again. Lorraine wrote a heartbreaking letter addressing the man who robbed her of her daughter. I don't believe there is one person who does not now know what happened to my bub, or hasn't noticed what has happened on that fateful day. Please help us for her children. They are innocent and gorgeous babies. Whoever you are, you have taken their mummy away. Their lifeline to fun times and happiness in their lives. Their tower of strength. They will never feel her soft, warm, and reassuring kisses, and her big, warm hugs with that big, contagious belly laugh of hers, and her radiant smile. Their memories are lost. They cannot say goodbye to her. Our pain, anguish, angst, and frustration are keeping us all down, causing us to wake up super vigilant that we might get a call to say they have found my bub. Whoever you are, you decided on that day to rip my daughter away from us, you bottom-feeding runt. We are left with question after question after question. We don't know how to grieve or what we are grieving. We are in a kind of grief limbo. Our little beautiful poor babies need to know where their mummy is. They are the innocent victims in this horrible nightmare we are enduring. Please, someone come forward so they can move on and grow into the amazing people their mummy would have wanted them to be. We can't honor and respect Carly's life until she is found. My daughter is reeling you in, and you will be a fine catch when you least expect it. This is my only wish, that we find my bub, that we can put her to rest. It is a basic human right with the dignity and respect that she deserves. Then her babies and their beautiful but broken hearts and heads can start to heal, and they may have a life without the anguish and pain and angst. You didn't give my daughter a chance. Please give her children the knowledge they ache for. William and Cadence should not be burdened with this pain. Please help us give them some semblance of grief and loss in their journey. Carly is a proud Aboriginal woman, as is her beautiful sister, and I am proud and honored to be their mother. No one deserves this in life, but my baby is reeling you in. You are breaking while we are aching. Your truth is Carly's truth, and in turn is our truth. Please, someone speak up. Since the police couldn't link Carly's disappearance to her ex-partner Andrew Easton, they turned their attention to another potential suspect, Sale Newson. During the investigation, they learned that the relationship between Carly and Sale was far from perfect. The man was very jealous, which was a frequent cause of their fights. Despite their relatively short relationship, Newson told everyone he was deeply in love with Carly, mentioning she was the first woman he had fallen in love with in the last 14 years. He desperately asked for any information, participated in launching a Facebook page, offered financial rewards, and knocked on every door in the area where she was last seen. But, notwithstanding these public statements of love and devotion, Newson almost immediately started intimate relationships with other women. Besides, a few hours after reporting Carly missing, he offered sexual intercourse to several women. Carly disappeared on September 30th, and on October 2nd, Sale spent the night with another woman, but in public, he behaved like an inconsolable guy who had lost the love of his life. Detectives also discovered that Sale and Carly had an argument 2 days before her disappearance. The reason for this fight was Facebook messages that Carly allegedly received from other men. However, all this was only circumstantial evidence. They needed direct links to bring any charges against Sale Newson. In April 2015, the authorities searched properties at 3 addresses, one in Muswell Brook and the other 2 in Scone. Scone is a town in the Upper Hunter Shire in the Hunter region of New South Wales, Australia. The distance from Scone to Muswell Brook is about 15 miles. During the searches, they seized 3 firearms and an unspecified amount of illegal substances and arrested a 24-year-old man, James Caneen. However, the police stressed that the charges weren't related to the ongoing investigation into Carly's disappearance, and yet they did arise during this investigation. Thus, we should keep this name in mind. Almost 2 years have passed since Carly was last seen alive. The police continued to investigate, but there were no new clues to help solve the case. But then, suddenly, there was a breakthrough. On August 7, 2016, in a rural area near Scone, 2 local pedestrians found the remains in a shallow grave in a bush just a few feet from the road. Forensic examination confirmed that these were the remains of Carly McBride, a mother of 2 from Belmont, who went missing on September 30, 2014, in Muswell Brook. The police postponed the announcement of finding her body for 4 days, hoping to obtain additional evidence. Superintendent Guiana repeated police suspicions that they did not suspect Carly, 31, had been snatched off a street by a stranger. "We don't believe that this was a random act, so we are looking into her past and as many people as we can find," he said outside Scone Police Station. But he stopped short of identifying any suspects in the case, as it is all too fresh. "It has taken us 2 years to get this breakthrough, and we have a fairly vast volume of fresh evidence that we need to evaluate in a thorough fashion," he said. "We have put a lot of work into this in the past 2 years. The team here is pretty keen to solve this for Carly's family, and we have got so much new evidence now that it is going to take a lot of work, but we are well into it, he said. The heartbroken parents have told through tears of their desperate need for answers. Please come forward with anything, anything, Lorraine sobbed. We still need to know who did this to my baby. The couple said they have had some closure now with her body being found and were extremely grateful for the police and public help to find their lost daughter. For 10 months, the investigators carried out extensive work, which resulted in the issued arrest warrant for Sale Newson. On June 19, 2017, he was arrested and taken to a police station. Newson denied any involvement in the death of Carly McBride. However, Sale Newson wasn't the only one who received charges. Police believed that 26-year-old James Canine was the one who helped Newson dispose of the body. Carly McBride, Sale Newson, and James Canine met in a rehabilitation center for people with addiction to alcohol and illegal substances. Each one left the center at different times and for various reasons, but they stayed in touch. The trial of Sale Newson began in August 2018 and protracted for several years because the police had only circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors alleged that Newson met with Carly after she left her ex-partner's house, struck her several blows to the head and back in a jealous rage, and threw her body away. Forensic experts have determined that Carly McBride died from multiple blunt force trauma. She suffered 23 fractures to her skull, 13 fractures to the torso, and spinal and rib fractures. The judge said Carly McBride suffered blunt force at the hands of Newson before she died. Judge Erase also noted how Newson had told interviewing police he was a skilled mixed martial arts fighter. His main sport was Thai boxing. I had 20 fights and 20 wins. I trained alongside world champions, but when I got really good, I got too old, he told police. I find the cause death was severe trauma to the brain due to a high degree of force to the deceased's head, the judge said. I am satisfied the offender caused death by the use of fists or feet or both or the use of objects. While searching Newson's house, police found the map in a shoebox under the bed. This map contained a drawn circle around the towns of Muswell Brook and Scone. Carly's remains were found exactly in this radius. That map also had the numbers 1, 2, and 3 written on it in locations outside Muswell Brook, with Senior Constable Mohini giving evidence that the first 2 numbers marked the location of point-to-point cameras. After the police found Carly's remains in 2016, Newson called her father, Steve. During the conversation, Newson mentioned that the found skeleton was missing hand bones, and yet the police never disclosed this information. The only people who knew about it were the police, Carly's parents, and the Department of Forensic Medicine at the John Hunter Hospital. As the authorities believed, Newson knew about it because he was familiar with the crime scene, and he was the person who left Carly's body where they found it 2 years later. Moreover, the clothes on Carly's remains matched the ones she wore on the day of her disappearance. It suggested she died shortly after leaving her former partner's house. The police couldn't find her purse and phone. When police searched Newson's mobile phone, they discovered he had deleted Google location services between September 18th and October 2nd, 2014. During the trial, the investigators learned that the photo of Carly, which Newson took on the way to Muswell Brook and later used in missing person flyers, was edited and cropped even before the police received the report of Carly missing. When the search for Carly began, Newson offered a $20,000 reward for information about her whereabouts. However, his bank account showed he was broke, which meant he offered the reward only because he knew no one would ever find her. Thus, he wouldn't have to pay. Newson injected himself into the police investigation from the start, trying to deflect suspicion onto others and attempting to get information about where police and other emergency services would be searching. He also conducted a canvass of the neighboring streets searching for CCTV or witnesses, which police said was done not to find information but to suppress it and to determine if anyone had seen him intercepting Ms. McBride. And while volunteers and police searched for her around Muswell Brook and handed out missing person flyers, Newson was in Sydney, messaging friends about how he was driving an Audi R8. As well as that, Newson claimed to know the area where Ms. McBride was found, like the back of my hand, and described it to Carly McBride's father, Steve McBride, despite only seeing footage of a fake crime scene set up by police. The images you are seeing now are not a real crime scene, but a staged one that the police used to see Newson's reaction. The more investigators dug into Newson, interviewed him, looked at his Facebook messages, listened to his phone calls, the more he shone the light on himself. After examining his internet search history, investigators discovered that he was looking for information on how to delete a Facebook account. His account remained active, but Carly's account got deleted shortly after. Although all the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecutor said they did have puzzle pieces that began to reveal a picture when put together. Eventually, these pieces turned into an irrefutable case, ruling out any other possible explanations for how Carly McBride disappeared and how her body was about 82 feet from the side of the road. The judge concluded that the motive for the brutal and unplanned attack on Carly was Newson's jealousy. After he picked Carly up from Muswell Brook, he discovered she had spent about 90 minutes with her ex-partner instead of spending time with her daughter, as was planned. Carly's daughter was not at home during that time, and the fact that she was alone with her ex-partner for an hour and a half allegedly ended with Newson attacking Carly in a jealous rage. Ms. McBride's mother, Lorraine Williams, told a sentencing hearing that she lived in a blur of grief and anxiety for 2 years as she waited for her happy, gorgeous, and outgoing daughter to come home to her 2 young children. Instead, the next time she saw Carly was in the morgue, a day she tearfully described as the worst day of my life. Carly should be here, living her life with her children, her sister, her father, and me, Ms. Williams said. After today, I never want to hear, speak, or see the man who took my beautiful daughter's life ever again. He no longer has any power to hurt me, and I refuse to think of him anymore. I will miss Carly for the rest of my life, every second of every day, Ms. Williams said. Almost 7 years after he reported Carly missing, 43-year-old Newson was found guilty. In December 2021, he was sentenced to 27 years in prison with parole eligibility in 2038. After the sentencing, Newson turned to the judge to restate his innocence. "I understand the verdict's been the verdict," he said. "Your Honor, I'm innocent. From the day I reported Carly missing to this very day, I've been compliant with the police, with the courts, with the jails, everything, and I've been found guilty of a crime that I did not commit. Someone out there has committed this crime, and it wasn't me. It wasn't me, and now I've got a big struggle ahead of me to try and clear my name through the courts after this." James Cunning, who helped Newson dispose of Carly McBride's body, denied his guilt. However, in July 2022, a jury found him guilty too. The judge said Cunning lied to police in 3 interrogations to create a false alibi for Newson and deleted data from the phone to cover his tracks. "Unfortunately, I couldn't find his picture, but it is known that when Cunning received charges in the Carly McBride case, he was already in prison for illegal weapons possession and prohibited substances." In November 2022, the 31-year-old Cunning showed almost no reaction when he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison with a 4-year parole period. After the trial, Carly's parents said that although justice had prevailed, and no matter the verdict, nothing would ever return their daughter. On February 5, 2010, at York Crown Court, Harold Landry's trial began under heavy scrutiny. Harold was accused of taking the life of his wife, Lucy Davis. The final hearing, marking a climactic end to this grim saga, took place in early February 2011 at Wolverhampton Court. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Judge David Fett, known for his uncompromising nature, presided over the proceedings. Harold Landry, a 64-year-old man, the center of this legal battle. The prosecutor, Rachel Brand, presented the evidence against Harold, painting a chilling picture of the events leading up to Lucy's tragic death. Brand's cold and precise delivery of facts left little room for doubt about Harold's guilt. Harold Landry had been convicted of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy Davis. Harold, who was supposed to be Lucy's protector, now stood condemned as her murderer. Pete, Harold's friend and lawyer, unable to bear the burden of defending him, passed the case to Andy Childs, an experienced attorney. Childs faced a daunting task: to convince the court that Harold had not intended to kill Lucy, but was driven to uncontrollable aggression. Throughout the trial, Harold was a figure of misery and regret. He wept openly, professing his love for Lucy and expressing deep remorse. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter, hoping to mitigate his sentence. The defense argued that Harold's actions were a result of an irresistible outburst of aggression, provoked by circumstances beyond his control. However, this argument faced fierce opposition. The prosecution presented the court with shocking photographs of Lucy's injuries. The sheer brutality depicted in these images spoke volumes, overshadowing Harold's claims of unintentional harm. Each piece of evidence painted a grimmer picture of Harold's actions on that fateful day. When the final verdict was announced, Harold Landry was sentenced to life in prison. The decision brought a sense of closure to the legal process, but left an indelible mark on all those involved. This tragic case stands as a somber reminder of the fine line between love and violence. It underscores the unpredictable nature of human relationships and the devastating consequences when that line is crossed. Lucy Davis's death serves as a poignant example of how quickly love can turn into a nightmare, leaving a trail of heartache and loss in its wake. Domestic violence can lead to fatal consequences, as it did in 1971 among the picturesque Welsh landscapes. Born in the small town of Pontypridd, Lucy Davis was a charming girl whose childhood was filled with unconditional love and warmth. Roger and Andrea, Lucy's parents, created an atmosphere of happiness and comfort in their home. Together with her younger sister Anna, Lucy grew up in the beautiful village of Glencoe. Lucy took her first steps among majestic mountains and enchanting forests. Her charming smile and kind heart set her apart from other children. She easily won the sympathy of her teachers and peers. Seeing his daughter's passion, her father gave her and her sister the opportunity to immerse themselves in the magical world of horseback riding. Under the strict guidance of experienced instructors, they learned the basics of this noble art, conquering peaks and overcoming obstacles. Lucy and Anna became professional horse riders. Spending her childhood in Wales was a real paradise for Lucy Davis. She blossomed like a beautiful flower there, absorbing the beauty of nature and the love of her family and loved ones. The hobby of horse riding not only gave Lucy and Anna loyal companions, but also served as a real school of life. Horses taught them discipline, self-control, and responsibility. The sisters' talent and perseverance were recognized at prestigious competitions, where they won multiple awards. However, Lucy's world wasn't limited to the riding arena. Her excellent mind and hunger for knowledge motivated her to make new discoveries. Music became another passion of young Lucy. She enthusiastically took flute and piano lessons, honing her skills. Her efforts were not in vain. A year later, she played both instruments perfectly, charming audiences with her talent. Lucy was delighted to join the Glamorgan Youth Orchestra, where her musical journey continued to flourish. Lucy Davis dedicated herself to refining her musical talents, finding an outlet for her love of music and creativity within the school choir. Music wasn't just a pastime for her, it was a profound means of expression. Growing up, Lucy's days were a blend of carefree play and diligent work, instilling in her a strong foundation of dedication and hunger for knowledge, qualities that would shape her future achievements and endear her to those around her. In high school, Lucy crossed paths with Garrett Jenkinson, a fellow Welshman shrouded in mystery. Despite the enigma surrounding Garrett's past, the two formed a close friendship that only deepened over time. Though Garrett harbored romantic feelings for Lucy, he chose to keep them buried deep within himself. Upon graduating in 1998, Lucy was resolute in her pursuit of a musical career and higher education. She secured admission to the University of Yorkshire in Northern England, initially envisioning herself as a future music educator. However, as her ambitions evolved, Lucy found herself drawn to the bustling artistic landscape of a metropolitan city. This newfound aspiration led her to Grimy McAllister, whose worldview and sense of humor resonated deeply with Lucy. Their relationship flourished, prompting Lucy to introduce Grimy to her parents. The initial encounter proved successful, solidifying the bond between Lucy and Grimey and setting the stage for their future together. Roger and Andre recognized him as the ideal life partner for their daughter almost instantly. After careful consideration, Lucy and Grimey made the decision to move in together, forging their own family. Sometime after the move, Lucy proposed the idea of official cohabitation, which Grimey agreed to in 1995. Even while still pursuing their studies in college, they welcomed a son into their lives, whom they named James. Lucy opted to take a break from her own pursuits to focus on caring for her son, while Grimey diligently continued his studies to provide for their family, taking up night shifts at the city's postal sorting department. Lucy into a whirlwind of challenges, but she faced them with optimism and determination. Despite her deep love for her family, the months spent at home with her child were tinged with loneliness. Rarely did she and her husband find time to be together, and his night shifts only exacerbated the situation. Seeking solace and connection, Lucy created a social media account under the pseudonym Massacre, immersing herself in a virtual community where she could share her experiences and forge new friendships. It was within this online realm that her attention was captured by a user named Harold Landry, a 53-year-old entrepreneur hailing from Louisiana. Rising from humble beginnings, Harold's fervent pursuit of independence and success from a young age propelled him to establish a thriving company manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States. His hard work not only brought him material wealth, but also garnered him prestige and eventually billionaire status. Conversing with Harold proved to be a revelation for Lucy. His life experiences, unwavering dedication, and boundless generosity left her captivated. However, their relationship faced its share of challenges. The disparity in their ages, social standings, and lifestyles created friction between them. Harold's life seemed extravagant and diverse, filled with eccentric hobbies and lavish acquisitions, including real estate holdings on KML. In Mexico, Harold's marital status was shrouded in mystery. He had been married twice and divorced twice, yet nothing was known about any children from these unions. However, in 1992, Harold's life took a dramatic turn when he divorced his second wife and crossed paths with Geraldine Price. Geraldine, born in 1966 and originally from Mexico, was 20 years his junior and married to Chris Price with 2 children. Despite her familial ties, Harold managed to capture the heart of this young woman. On February 6, 1994, Harold orchestrated a romantic dinner for Geraldine in New Orleans. They hired a babysitter, Christian Hurton, to tend to their children, allowing them to enjoy an evening devoid of parental responsibilities. As the night drew to a close, Harold escorted his girlfriend home. In a gesture of gratitude, he offered Christian a ride home, to which she accepted. Unbeknownst to Harold, fate had a surprise in store. Chris Price, Geraldine's husband, had been surveilling the couple. Upon witnessing their clandestine affair, Chris resolved not to let the matter slide. He pursued Harold, and when they halted at a red light, Chris unleashed a torrent of accusations. Despite Harold's composed demeanor, the situation escalated. In a fit of rage, Chris dared Harold to shoot him. Without hesitation, Harold brandished his firearm, warning Chris of the consequences. Ignoring the warning, Chris goaded Harold further. In a swift and decisive action, Harold fired, striking Chris in the neck. Miraculously, prompt medical intervention spared Chris's life. In 1997, Harold stood trial in St. Mary Parish courts, charged with the attempted murder of Chris Price. His attorney, Pete Fannin, argued that Harold had been entrapped. Although the jury found Harold guilty of aggravated assault with a weapon, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, following an appeal, Harold was released on parole, having paid a fine and completed community service. Harold found himself forever indebted to Pete for his legal representation and unwavering advocacy, which ultimately secured his freedom. As their friendship blossomed, Harold and Chris reached a settlement agreement, though the exact compensation remained undisclosed. Settling in Covington as a wealthy man, Harold openly shared his past with Lucy, including failed marriages and a troubling incident. Rather than repelling Lucy, Harold's revelations only seemed to deepen her attraction towards him. His gift of persuasion captivated her, and after parting ways with Grimmy, Lucy and Harold decided to embark on a romantic relationship. Eager to shield their love from unnecessary complications, Harold endeavored to avoid any potential troubles. In the early 2000s, he journeyed to England to meet Lucy's parents, Roger and Andre, who, despite initial surprise at the age difference, supported their daughter's choice wholeheartedly, refraining from interference in their relationship. Expressing his devotion through lavish gifts, including expensive jewelry, Harold spared no expense in fulfilling Lucy's desires. His love for her grew so intense that thoughts of marriage lingered constantly in his mind, yet he insisted on perfection before taking the plunge. Seeking to fortify their bond, Harold extended an invitation to Lucy, her son Jameson, and her ex-husband Grimmy for an unforgettable trip to Mexico. To Harold, Mexico wasn't merely a vacation spot, it represented paradise, amplified by the proximity of Pete's apartment, lending an air of comfort to their excursion. Inspired by the purchase of a diamond engagement ring, Harold excitedly shared the news with Pete, who harbored suspicions about Lucy's fidelity due to her frequent rendezvous with Grimmy. Blinded by love, Harold proposed to Lucy, and she accepted his proposal, leading to their marriage in the midst of 2003. Acquiring a $1 million home in Warshire County, their new family life in the neighborhood overflowed with joy. Welcoming Jameson into the family with open arms, Harold treated him as his own, fostering a strong familial bond. Soon after their wedding, their daughter, Hearth, was born, becoming the apple of their eyes. Surrounded by supportive neighbors like Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, Lucy and Harold's familial ties deepened with each passing day. However, as time went on, issues began to arise in their relationship. Harold grew increasingly demanding, expecting Lucy's unwavering obedience. Lucy, who had always been an independent woman, was not prepared to acquiesce to Harold's every demand. Arguments and disagreements became more frequent, casting a shadow over their family life. Their son, Jameson, bore witness to this tense atmosphere, and it negatively impacted his childhood. Even their neighbors began to take note of Lucy and Harold's escalating reliance on alcohol, exacerbating their familial problems. However, when the arguments and shouting ceased, neighbors interpreted it as a sign that the family was attempting to reconcile. In 2009, Lucy found solace in virtual conversations with her old school friend, Garrett, via social media. Sensing his wife's emotional distance, Harold made the difficult decision to leave for Mexico, allowing Lucy space. In his absence, Lucy invited Garrett to visit, blindsiding Harold upon his return. Lucy swiftly filed for divorce, prompting Harold to begin an affair with their neighbor, Rachel Walbin. The divorce proceedings were marred by disputes over property division. Lucy, adamant about keeping the house for the sake of their children, opposed Harold's insistence on selling it. Their disagreements intensified as Lucy revealed unsettling truths about Harold's past, further fueling the acrimony. Amidst the emotional turmoil, Lucy accepted Garrett's invitation to spend time with him in Wales, making no effort to conceal her phone conversations from Harold upon her return. Despite her efforts to salvage their relationship, the constant arguments persisted, and the tension between them became unbearable for Jameson and their daughter, Hearth. On the evening of February 1, 2010, as the day drew to a close, Harold, intoxicated from several glasses of wine, was taken aback by the delivery of a package addressed to their neighbor, Stephen Kennedy. It was closer to 9 p.m. when Harold returned from work. Stephen noticed a notification that his parcel had been delivered to Harold. Seeing Harold at home, he approached him to retrieve his package. Harold greeted him warmly and offered him a drink. Stephen, not refusing a glass of wine, agreed, and Harold poured him one. As Stephen entered and greeted Lucy, he observed Harold was already inebriated. After a single glass of wine, Stephen took his parcel and left. Shortly after, a heated argument erupted between the couple regarding furniture for their new house. Jameson, hearing the commotion, rushed into the kitchen to witness Harold striking his mother with a kitchen utensil. Reacting promptly, He dialed the police and comforted his sister, Lucy, who was then fleeing the house with the children. Lucy sought refuge at Stephen's house, hoping for assistance. However, en route, Harold caught up with her and viciously attacked her with a knife, stabbing her in the chest. Callously, he dragged her body under a bush and disappeared. Hearing Lucy's screams, Stephen rushed outside and discovered her body. Initially thinking she had fainted, he quickly realized the severity of the situation. Officer Steve C. Fox, arriving at the scene, promptly called for an ambulance and commenced a search for Harold. Despite efforts, Harold evaded capture, leaving behind terrified children who sought shelter until the police arrived. This tragic incident marked the onset of their family's downfall and the start of a grueling journey towards justice. An ambulance promptly arrived and transported Lucy to Yorkshire Hospital, but it was too late. Lucy succumbed to her injuries upon arrival. Meanwhile, consumed by fear and remorse, Harold sought solace at the doorstep of his friend Rachel. With trembling voice, he confessed to committing a heinous act, but withheld the details. In an attempt to atone, he transferred a substantial sum of $40,000 to Rachel, relinquished all his assets, including cash, car keys, and paychecks. After Harold headed home, the police began their search for him. They scoured the streets, interviewed witnesses, but Harold seemed to vanish into thin air. Finally, fortune smiled upon the detectives when Harold was arrested on his way from Rachel's house. His face, distorted by fear and remorse, spoke volumes. Lucy's family, Roger and Andrea, were overwhelmed with grief. In an official press release, they expressed immense sorrow for the loss of their daughter and declined to comment further. The forensic medical examination confirmed Lucy died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. Evidence found at the crime scene and the testimony of Jameson, Lucy's son, who witnessed the tragedy, became pivotal in solving the case. The tale of Harold and Lucy is a love story turned nightmare. Although the trial concluded, the echo of the tragedy will resonate for years to come. Harold Landry, found guilty of Lucy's death, was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 16 years before parole eligibility. He would be 82 years old upon release, but no sentence could bring Lucy back. Roger and Andrea found solace in the fair verdict, though their hearts remained heavy with grief. Harold Landry maintained his innocence, vowing to appeal the verdict, claiming he wouldn't change anything, even knowing the future. The Landry family remained resilient, promising to preserve Lucy's memory by embodying her best qualities for their grandchildren. Despite the irreparable loss, Lucy would forever remain a symbol of light and love in their hearts. Looking ahead, the Landry family embraced hope. Harold received the punishment he deserved, while Lucy's legacy continued to inspire her loved ones. With Lucy's love and light in their hearts, the Landry family found the strength to move forward, carrying her memory with them into the future.
Heather, just 22 years old, had recently embarked on her college journey, settling into her job, and it felt like life was full of promise. Maples' smile and laughter were contagious, and her constant chatter filled the air. She radiated warmth and energy, uplifting everyone around her. Everything changed on January 7th, 2015, when Heather Maples didn't show up for work. Her lifeless body was discovered in her apartment, partly unclothed. Who had the right to take Heather Maples' life? Detectives faced a challenging investigation because Heather had no enemies, and the motive behind this crime remained unclear. If not for one small detail, Heather Maples' death could have remained unsolved, and the criminal would have gone unpunished.
Yes, det är svårt att säga en your worth. The only way to play figure for good there is you're an airy point. Ain't in your hand or your waiver.
On a typical morning at the real estate agency in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, on August 7th, 2015, Kelsey Price arrived at work and began her usual tasks. Heather, her friend and colleague, was running late, which wasn't surprising to Kelsey, as Heather was known for her lack of punctuality. Kelsey started calling Heather to wake her up, but received no answer. The previous night, Heather had planned to go to a bar with some friends and had asked Kelsey to come get her if she overslept or didn't answer her calls. Therefore, Kelsey wasn't concerned and went to Heather's apartment to wake her up. The girls' apartments were located in the same complex where they worked. Upon arriving, Kelsey found the front door unlocked. Easily entering inside, she saw her friend lying on the bed, sleeping on her stomach, wearing only a crop top and no underwear. Assuming Heather had a wild night, Kelsey tried to wake her up, but there was no response. She then tapped Heather's foot, attempting to rouse her from her sleep, which no one would ever interrupt again. Maple's foot was so cold that Kelsey literally jumped back in horror at the realization of what had happened. Kelsey Price, in horror, stepped out of the apartment and called 911. Soon, emergency services were on the scene. Detective Tommy Massey was one of the first to arrive at the crime scene, and the forensic team meticulously combed through the apartment. Heather was indeed partially undressed, with signs of blows on her face. The hair of the poor girl was soaked in blood, which was also splattered on the walls. It was clear she had been brutally beaten, tortured, and actually assaulted. Massey and his colleague, Detective Maples, coincidentally sharing Heather's surname, recalled this crime as a horrifying nightmare. That's understandable, as witnessing such a heart-wrenching scene is extremely difficult. Heather Nicole Maples was born on August 23, 1992, in Ocala, Florida. Her mother jokingly called Heather a hurricane baby. This nickname was entirely justified, as many envied the energy and courage that Heather possessed. In 2004, Jennifer Hunter gave birth to her second child. Heather welcomed a brother, Ryan, into her life with great joy. However, Ryan was later diagnosed with significant developmental delays, and the older sister, of her own accord, dedicated all her free time to him. She took care of him, happily spent time with him, taught him to speak, walk, and eat on his own. Heather was in the 7th grade at the time and devoted all the following years until graduation to Ryan, showing immense love and dedication to her brother. At the age of 22, Heather Maples made the bold decision to leave her Texas home and embark on a new chapter in Tennessee, pursuing her dream of becoming a psychologist. The journey began with a call from her former classmate, Chaz, inviting her to join him in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where he studied. According to him, it was the perfect place for Heather, with a small college town where she could get a great opportunity to prepare for college. Heather accepted, and in January 2015, the future student went to Chaz in Murfreesboro. By the way, their relationship soon turned romantic. A completely different life began for the girl. With the support of her best friend Kelsey, Heather found a job in the office of the residential complex where they lived. Maples was balancing work with her college preparations. Her friends and family supported her. Everything seemed to be going well, but soon her relationship with Chaz began to crumble, which led to a breakup, and Chaz moved away. At the beginning of August, she excitedly called her mother to share this wonderful news. She had been accepted to college. Her mother, filled with pride, was thrilled for Heather's achievement. However, a week later, Heather failed to show up for work, sparking concern and uncertainty. The detectives understood that, considering the nature of the crime, it could have been related to Heather's personal life. At that point, most of her friends were considered suspects, and frankly speaking, there were reasons for that. Upon examining the apartment, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Heather likely knew her attacker and possibly let them in herself. After a thorough investigation of the crime scene, several important pieces of evidence were discovered: unknown DNA and a hair that did not belong to the victim. All of this was sent for analysis to identify the suspect. However, the most significant piece of evidence was a clear, bloody fingerprint on the right side of Heather's bed. Detective Massey explained that if someone had deliberately dipped their finger in ink and intentionally left their mark, it wouldn't have been so clear and precise. Of course, this print was sent for analysis as well. Additionally, Heather's mobile phone was found in the apartment, but without the password, accessing its contents was impossible. This is where Kelsey came in handy. She played a crucial role, not only helping with the phone, but also deciding to inform Heather's mother of her death, believing it would be better coming from someone who loved and cared for Heather. Detective Massey hoped to get a lot of information about Heather from her friend Kelsey Price. He wanted to know everything about the victim's personal life, especially her relationship with Chaz. Kelsey told the detective that the relationship was quite tense, as Chaz had obvious anger management issues, and sometimes he was too aggressive and cruel towards Heather, so the girl decided to end the relationship herself. Therefore, the police immediately decided to investigate Chaz, but an unexpected turn of events occurred. A young man named Michael was determined to access the crime scene despite the caution tape. He had keys to Heather's apartment.
How do you know, Heather? This is doing me rude, but I gotta ask you because sometimes if he kills, it's so out here, huh? The precise letter that he had sexual romantic alone together, and then he tried to take him more. Thank you.
According to Michael, on the evening before her death, Heather called him and invited him for dinner, which he accepted. Immediately after dinner, Michael went home, unlike Heather, who went to a local bar with friends. But later, Heather reached out to Michael for help.
She called me at 11:40, and I was all looking for his house in the southern. Because it tells me that I didn't come to the war. She really needs there right now. There's people that ain't on there, and she's really upset. So I said, "Callie."
As Michael recounted, Heather was in trouble. A young man named Ortavio was bothering her and was quite aggressive. Immediately after the incident, Michael offered to drive Heather home.
She orders. Is there granny acts, threats? Sausage. Hurry. And we severed. She was done. I drove her to her at Breeze. Yeshua. Stairs. I not took she was at.
As per his statement, it was around 2:30 in the morning on August 7th, the last time he saw Heather. Additionally, during the interrogation, Michael mentioned that Heather's front door should have been unlocked because he had her keys since she was dressed in a dress and didn't have pockets to carry them, and he simply forgot to return them after unlocking the door. Michael was very disappointed and did not seem like a liar at all, but investigators had to take his fingerprints and a DNA sample. They also contacted the bar to obtain surveillance footage, which confirmed everything Michael had said during the interrogation. Analysis confirmed that the fingerprints and DNA found at the crime scene did not match his. After Michael was cleared as a suspect, investigators turned their attention to the man who had been with Heather that night, Ortavio. With Kelsey's help in unlocking Heather's mobile phone, interest in Ortavio significantly increased. Detectives discovered that Heather had messaged Ortavio, a friend of hers, inviting him to her apartment just hours before she was found dead.
What are we doing? I don't know. A whole wire down here is sensitive, knife styles, honey, hearing up you wasn't so you or what is it me up? I think she finished out when it gets lands and like.
But why did Heather call Ortavio to her home after Michael had saved her from him? The answer was simple. They were friends, and became more persistent than usual at the bar. Heather was caught off guard. She wasn't prepared for this. Now the detectives needed to speak with Ortavio to get his side of the story.
What did you do to get her there for that? Oh, no, we're chasing you.
We went to Jill's for a while. Okay, and it was Heather, a friend of mine. I'll show you a picture, okay? Yeah, many out there will never have been taken, but a little good this one was. It done Jill's. Yeah, in house there, see it anyway. It was so sad.
The detectives immediately realized that Ortavio was unaware of Heather's death, but what if he was somehow involved in this case? Meanwhile, the interrogation continued.
Heather says you came back from Chicago and we met about to meet you. And so that was it.
Afterward, Massey eventually asked about the late-night message from Heather.
She takes it out of text, yella. 30 or something. He said it left. Oh, well, all Larry's. He was on this one.
The detectives intensified their questioning of Ortavio, using a tough interrogation method that not every suspect could withstand.
He was sorry while you are in all records since you are him. You were wavered yesterday. Your kids was wizard all day. Is yours not your take just full take? Outlays you takes you from back over there. He went over there, and then something happened. And not only was this girl raped, she's dead. What? No way. His way, one day, here's what we were doing. There's DNA all over later. This gonna go back, I believe, for one yesterday. Oh, no, that's...
Ortavio was shocked by what he heard. It seemed he genuinely didn't know what had happened to Heather. Following the interrogation, he willingly agreed to a DNA test, confident that it would clear his name. The results proved him right, as the DNA found at the crime scene did not match his, leading to his exclusion as a suspect. Without any leads, the detectives worked practically around the clock, reviewing surveillance footage, scrutinizing every detail provided by witnesses. On the 9th day of the investigation, as Detective Massey was preparing to leave the office late at night, he received a crucial call from one of the directors of the forensic laboratory. Massey finally got the answer regarding the bloody fingerprint that was lifted from Heather's bed. It belonged to a young man named Brandon Bowling, whose fingerprints were on file due to his employment at a company where he previously worked.
You know him. He named Chase. You don't remember, well,
This development prompted Detective Massey to approach the interrogation very gently, wanting to give Brandon a chance to explain what happened that night.
Is out here though, that to let you know, wasn't there an altar? You never said she keep mutted law, sir. Though yes, his head reared, it was eventually into a lot more hurt. And he was alive. Stop, sir. Son Talon, you were delivered. Here we do. Was the last time you were at my farm? Tell me, is you lying?
The detectives knew he was lying because the fingerprint was fresh.
You know you were there. No, I haven't. So Ned, you need to tell me. So that I can understand I go, no, I'll fair. I don't know there, isn't it? Okay, I'm then headed through as you pay your pre-on. Yeah, the bed. I'm such the deal. So it's stay something housed. I'll house first card.
It seemed that Brandon understood he was caught, but he continued to deny any involvement in Heather's death.
That he may, young man, is this so important? Made him put you to death. Do you understand? And this here, this is the no support conversation in your life. The only way you're bloody fair thing out there is you're an airplane. Ain't at your handler, you're a waver. So,
that little what out of me.
After questioning, detectives requested a DNA test from Brandon, suggesting that if he was innocent, the test would prove it. Brandon did as he was asked, perhaps hoping to be released from police custody, but that did not happen. The investigators decided not to wait for the test results. The match of the fingerprint provided substantial grounds for the next step. The police immediately sent a request to the court for permission to access Brandon's phone, which could help the investigation confirm his movements, track calls, and texts on the night of the crime. However, they were unprepared for what they found on his phone after the court approval. The video from Brandon Bowling's phone was one of the most shocking, even to the most experienced detectives. In this video, the room of the core Heather was captured. Brandon recorded everything, from intimate acts to beatings. Heather was still alive at the time of the recording. In February 2018, Brandon Richmond Bowling pleaded guilty to the attack on Heather Maples. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. On the day of the verdict, Heather's mother, Jennifer, made a speech that surprised many.
I had you right along the job, my daughter. That ain't where I learned. Don't worry about anything, worry about everything.
When the trial ended, in the corridor, Jennifer approached Bowling's mother. Jennifer simply hugged this woman, saying that they both lost their children that day. Unfortunately, Brandon Bowling never explained his motives. What are your thoughts on this? What do you think Brandon's motive was, if there was one? The case of Sheila LaBarre, a monster with an angelic appearance. Psychological and physical traumas received at an early age can have a very unpredictable effect on adult life. Of course, far from always, they lead to the fact that a person becomes cruel and seeks to hurt others, but sometimes it is the trauma can give rise to a real monster. Criminal psychologist Adrian Raine believes that there are genetic and psychophysical mechanisms that can turn a person into a cold-blooded killer, about which he wrote in detail in his book, Anatomy of Violence. History knows a lot of serial criminals who had a truly hellish childhood, and perhaps to them can be attributed our heroine today, Sheila LaBarre. This woman had an angelic appearance which she skillfully used, seducing her victims and then brutally murdered them. Despite the fact that the court was able to prove only 2 of her crimes, criminologists are sure that there were many more. And now let's look at this difficult story from the beginning and try to understand whether Sheila LaBarre was a born monster or became him as a result of the cruelty that she faced in childhood. Who is Sheila LaBarre? Sheila LaBarre was born in 1958, the 4th of July, in the small country town of Fort Payne, Alabama. She was the youngest of 3 children of her parents and was raised with her brother and sister Lynn. Her childhood was spent in a picturesque but rather secluded place, on a farm nestled among cornfields. According to the memories of Lynn's older sibling, Sheila was an active, inquisitive, and open-minded girl with a creative streak. She liked to be in the center of attention, had a good voice and cute appearance, so perhaps, if her life had turned out differently, she would have become a famous actress or singer. But instead of bright posters, her name decorated the pages of criminal chronicles. The unimaginable cruelty of her father. The head of the family, Manuel Bailey, for many years suffered from alcohol addiction, although it would be more accurate to say that his addiction suffered from his entire family. He often went on binges, turning into a real beast who enjoyed abusing his wife and children. He insulted and humiliated them, beat them with anything that came to hand, could throw everyone out in the middle of the night in a downpour or frost, and locked himself in the house, not letting anyone inside. Mothers, daughters, and sons often had to spend the night in a barn or in the open air in the field. One day, when Manuel was once again in a drunken rage, he began throwing dishes and other objects at his family members. The mother tried to cover the children as best she could, but one of the flower pots thrown by her husband hit her youngest daughter Sheila in the head. Sheila suffered a serious concussion and a lifelong scar on her temple, which she painstakingly covered with her hair. But not even the insults and beatings were the worst thing that the sisters had to endure in their parents' home. According to the memories of Sheila and Lynn,
Manuel, from an early age, forcibly inclined them to intimacy. The mother may have been aware of what was going on, but the subject was never broached. However, despite the nightmare at home, Sheila did well enough in school. She dreamed of leaving the farm as soon as possible and go to conquer the big city. The girl was quite ambitious and determined. She passionately wanted to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or pop singer. And she had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a beautiful voice. Adulthood, first marriage. Barely Sheila was 18 years old. She left her parents' home, but adult life was not so joyful. To enter the university, she was not allowed to average score, and to move to the big city, she simply did not have the money. Then Sheila got a job as a maid in one of the hotels, where by that time her older sister was already working. It should be noted that Sheila had a slender figure and a very attractive appearance. She had big blue eyes, a charming smile, and a mop of thick long hair. She was surrounded by attention from men, and over time, she learned to use it and manipulate her suitors. In the late 70s, LeBar, then Bailey, met a guy named Jonathan Baxter, and a romantic relationship began between them. Jonathan was not yet 20 years old at the time, but he already had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a hindrance, and soon the couple got married. However, this marriage lasted only a few months and collapsed after Jonathan learned that the young wife abused his daughter while he disappeared at work. Sheila was frankly annoyed with the child, and she would raise her hand or lock her in a closet if she started crying or acting up. Jonathan did not organize scandals and listen to explanations. He just Strazoot filed for divorce and put his wife with his belongings outside his house. He never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila dated various men and mostly lived off them. But all these relationships were fleeting and lasted from a few weeks to a couple of months, until in the early 80s she met her future second husband, Ronnie Jennings. The tumultuous romance soon led to marriage, and Sheila took on a double last name, Bailey Jennings. It was an unhealthy relationship between two irascible and unstable people who regularly cheated on each other, scandalized, and even fought. Still, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after another family quarrel, Sheila demanded a divorce from her husband, but he refused her. In fact, Ronnie did not hold on to the relationship at all. He just wanted to piss off his wife and make her mad, and he succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large number of drugs in front of her husband, drinking strong alcohol, and after this infernal cocktail, sat behind the wheel of the car and rushed down the road. Naturally, soon Sheila, under the influence of pills and alcohol, lost consciousness, flew off the road, and at high speed crashed into a tree. She miraculously survived, but suffered a massive head injury. She spent more than a week in a deep coma, and doctors made no prognosis. When Sheila finally regained consciousness and gradually recovered, she was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where she spent several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the orderlies was constantly harassing her and possibly taking advantage of her helpless state when she was heavily sedated. After all this, Sheila returned to her second husband's home, but began to behave not just aggressively, but threateningly toward him. When during another scandal she attacked Ronnie and poked him in the chest with nail scissors, Ronnie, fearing for his own life and health, filed for divorce and hurriedly moved out of the mad woman. Rich lover. When the second marriage was dissolved, the young woman began looking for lovers through the dating columns of the print media, and she left her ads there as well. But no man did not stay with her for long, because Sheila tended to dominate everything, rigidly suppressing their partners both in intimate and everyday life. Soon the photo of an attractive girl in the dating section drew the attention of 60-year-old Wilfred Bill LeBar. The man had previously been married twice and had adult children and grandchildren from previous marriages. He was widowed a few years ago and had been living alone on his large country ranch ever since. Bill was a fairly wealthy man. He had a chiropractic office in Epping, New Hampshire, and on the ranch he raised horses. At the same time, he was very lonely and needed a strong, powerful woman. In fact, that's exactly what he found. Sheila was attracted by the wealth of her new acquaintance, and she decided that it would be an ideal union for her. And to make Bill completely lost his head, she began to send him a postal mail frank letters, supplementing them with her nude photos. The trap worked, and soon LaBarre invited a charming pen pal to visit his ranch. Their romance developed rapidly. An elderly man is not stingy on expensive gifts for a young mistress, and in the summer of 1987, she moved to live with him. This has incredibly flattered the doctor, who now went out in public with a beautiful companion who was half his age and was fit for him as a daughter. Nevertheless, he did not plan to marry Sheila. However, Sheila, not waiting for a marriage proposal, changed her name, calling herself LaBarre. Bill was surprised by this turn of events, but he did not object. Sheila began to interfere in all the affairs of her elderly lover, starting to control his business, finances, and disposition of his property. In addition, Bill was getting older and could not satisfy the intimate needs of a young woman. Then, according to Sheila herself, he allowed her to meet other men, whom she often brought directly to their home. One of Sheila's regular lovers, closer to the mid-90s, was a Jamaican national named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as an au pair on the ranch, but soon the young man, with Bill's consent, which was probably given under pressure from Sheila, moved to live in the owner's house. In 1995, Sheila and Wayne officially legalized their relationship, and the spouse considered that from now on, he would be her only man. But soon he realized that he was wrong, because his wife continued to meet with different men. Wayne was not satisfied with this, and one day he jumped with fists on Sheila and her next lover, causing them bodily harm. Accustomed to being dominated, Sheila for the first time didn't know how to deal with her third husband, who got into a fight every time a rival appeared on the horizon. Eventually, she filed for divorce and sought a court injunction to stop Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Another divorce did not affect the turbulent personal life of Sheila, who continued to meet with numerous lovers, changing them like gloves. True, now her relationship increasingly often began to end with lawsuits from men who accused Sheila not just in cruelty, but also in the threat to their lives and health. Thus, one of her boyfriends she deliberately hit by a car and almost ran over. Another almost broke his head, and another scratched his face so that he was forever scarred. Sheila, with age, became more and more dangerous to others. From every man she demanded obedience, and in cases of disobedience, fell into a rage. In 2000, at the age of 74, Bill LaBarre died of heart failure. Although doctors and police officers did not see a criminal trail in the death of an elderly man, his family members were convinced that Sheila had something to do with it. In their opinion, she had been poisoning Bill little by little for years, and literally drove him into the light. Despite the fact that Bill and Sheila were never officially married, Sheila, according to the will, became the sole heiress of all his property. The relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They are still convinced that the mistress forced Bill to write the will she wanted. House of Temptation. After Bill's death, as I have already mentioned, all his property came under Sheila's complete control. Now she no longer had to consider anyone's opinion. She could do whatever she wanted with the estate she had inherited. She herself called her home a place of seduction and pleasure, where there were no inhibitions. She met men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, lured them to her, and then tried to keep them on the ranch as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or any physical appearance. She promised them unearthly pleasure, and then sought to suppress and subjugate them to her will. Sheila regularly tried to seduce couriers by meeting them in the nude and offering an alternative method of payment. But she didn't take into account the fact that she herself was not getting any younger, and was nowhere near as attractive as she used to be. It got to the point where couriers simply refused to come to her address. Neighbors noticed that on the ranch, LaBarre, constantly come different men, but some hurried to leave the place the same day. Others were delayed, but also for a short time. What was going on in the house itself could only be guessed at. Where had Michael DeLorge disappeared to? Soon, Sheila decided to look for lovers among men who were in dire need of housing, money, or those men who suffered from addiction. This category was the most vulnerable, and proved to be an easy prey for the cunning woman, who everywhere posed as a widowed millionaire, and talked about her untold wealth, inherited by her. In 2004, Labar met on one of the city streets homeless man named Michael Delage. He was in a difficult life situation and lost literally everything because of addiction to illegal drugs. His relatives tried to send him to a rehabilitation clinic, but he ran away from there and has been loitering ever since. Sheila liked Michael, and she invited him to her, promising shelter, food, and the necessary drugs in exchange for intimacy. Moving to the ranch, the guy was completely dependent on his old mistress. He complied with all her demands, afraid to be on the street again. But Sheila quickly got into the taste, and her desires became more and more sophisticated. She bound, beat, and humiliated Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they wouldn't believe him. Meanwhile, Sheila found him each time and brought him back to the ranch. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. His loved ones immediately responded to this disturbing news, but it was too late. In October 2005, Michael Delage disappeared without a trace. When his family contacted Sheila directly, she stated that she and Michael had broken up. He had left her, and his current whereabouts were unknown to her. Michael did not show up at any of the places he had been to before. No one who knew him had seen him, and there was no way to contact him. Contacting the police was fruitless, and Labar remained beyond suspicion, trusting Kenny County. Sheila's tales of her exorbitant wealth were greatly exaggerated, and the house and automobile had to be maintained, so she was forced to get a job. Naturally, Sheila chose an occupation to her liking. She became an operator of intimate phone services. Since she had a truly enchanting voice, men fell for the bait and offered to meet her in person. Among such guys was Kenny County, who at the time of their acquaintance was barely 24 years old. The young man was attractive in appearance, very good-natured and open. However, he had a low IQ level, due to which he was very gullible. This was exactly the kind of guy Labar was looking for. Kenny was very close to his mother, on whom he actually depended, but Sheila, with the help of clever manipulations, managed to break this connection and literally lure Kenny to herself. She made him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams, about which he informed his relatives, and then moved to live in Sheila's house. But soon Sheila showed the guy her true face, having arranged for him a real torture room in one of the rooms. Each time, intimacy inevitably turned into a brutal beating or something worse. Kenny's body was covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, cuts, and burn marks. But he could not leave the house of the mistress who had completely subjugated his will. Sheila did not allow him to see and communicate with his loved ones, and his family could only guess what was happening to Kenny. The first alarm was raised by neighbors who periodically noticed the guy and were horrified by his sickly appearance. A few days before his disappearance, a local store clerk took a picture of the young man on her cell phone camera, and later this picture was attached to the case file in court. In the photo, Kenny's condition could be described as deplorable. He was very thin, there were huge bruises under his eye and on his cheek, and his nose was probably broken. Judging by the degree of healing, all these injuries had been inflicted at different times, which suggested that the guy had been brutally beaten for a long time. The contents of his cart were also alarming. He rolled 2 large canisters of fuel to the cash register, as it later turned out, for his own cremation. The store employees were so puzzled and even frightened by the guy's appearance that they decided to report him to the police for possible domestic violence. But this time, Sheila managed to get away with it, and they could not charge her with anything. Soon Kenny stopped contacting his family altogether, and when his worried mother arrived at Labar's house, the owner behaved aggressively and advised to leave Kenny alone. All subsequent attempts ended similarly, at which point Kenny County's family filed a missing persons report with the police, indicating that he may be being held forcibly at the country ranch, a home crematorium, and gruesome findings. When police arrived at Sheila's home, she claimed that the young man no longer lived with her, and claimed that Kenny had run away because his mother, whom he was allegedly terrified of, began visiting them frequently. As evidence, Sheila provided an audio recording in which she asks her lover if his own mother had attacked him, and he quietly gives an affirmative answer. It all seemed more than strange, and the very next day, an officer visiting Sheila secured a search warrant for the estate. Sheila had been on the police's radar many times before, and her name had been linked to another mysterious disappearance of a boyfriend. But over the years, Sheila had never been questioned, and her house and grounds had never been searched. When the police arrived, they did not find Labar at home, but they did see several fires burning near the outbuildings. The fires looked strange and were made of improvised materials, a mattress, fragments of wooden furniture, hay, etc., all doused with a flammable mixture. One of the bonfires had bones in it that clearly looked like human remains. The squad requested reinforcements in the form of forensic experts, reporting all the findings. But that turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg compared to what they discovered next. Almost all over the house were found poorly washed traces of blood. It was so much that it seemed as if there had been a real massacre. It turned out that the blood belonged to at least 3 different people. The bones smoldering in the fire belonged to the missing Kenny, and there were 2 empty fuel cans lying nearby, the same ones the boy had bought at the local store the day before. But that wasn't all. Also found on the property were the remains of Michael Delage, who had disappeared a few years earlier, and some fingers of some third guy who was never identified. Among other things, a large number of items belonging, judging by the size, to various men were fished out of the sump at the ranch, the fates of which have not been learned. The hostess herself was not at home at the time of the police visit. She had figured it out and gone on the run. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston, where she obviously hoped to get lost. Moreover, on the way, she seduced one of the drivers who gave her a ride, and he trustingly invited her to live in his house. However, the next day, having seen on TV news about the search for a dangerous criminal, the new lover himself called the police and reported that Sheila is now in his bed. It was there that she was arrested. During the search of Sheila's home, another frightening find was made: a box of videotapes. On the tapes, Kenny, Michael, and several other men confessed to horrific crimes, but judging by the guy's appearance and condition, they made these confessions under torture. Since Labar's arrest, her mental health has raised a lot of questions, so the court ordered the necessary evaluations. Sheila was found to have a delusional disorder, as well as signs of schizophrenia. She called herself an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. It was Sheila's failing mental health that became the basis on which her attorney tried to build a defense. He called his client a profoundly sick person and tried to prove that she was not aware of her actions. The reason for this was the mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. The defendant herself claimed that many years ago, when she was in that terrible accident and found herself in a coma on the verge of death, she met with God, and the latter told her to cleanse the world of men who infringe on children. Sheila's ex-husbands and some of Sheila's lovers also spoke in court, who, in one voice, called her a crazy, unstable, and extremely violent woman. And Wayne Ennis, the third husband, said that the ex-wife repeatedly persuaded him to kill Mr. Labar in order to seize his property. But despite the defense's attempts to convince the court that Sheila was insane and in need of treatment, it was proven that she was aware of her actions at the time of her crimes. She was found guilty in July 2008 and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of ever being released. All of her appeals were rejected. Sheila is now serving her sentence in Florida at Homestead Correctional Facility. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samantha Josephson. In the heart of Columbia, South Carolina, amidst the energy of a bustling college town, the life of a young student named Samantha Lee Josephson took a dark and tragic turn. Her story gripped the nation and shed light on the potential dangers that can exist in the most routine aspects of our lives. Samantha was a shining presence on the University of South Carolina campus. Tragically, a routine night out led to a series of events that would profoundly impact the lives of those who knew her. Samantha Lee Josephson was born to her parents, Seymour and Marcy Josephson, in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. As a student, she attended the University of South Carolina, where she majored in political science. Samantha, who was a senior in college, planned on graduating in 2019 and attending Drexel University School of Law, where she wanted to study to become an international law specialist. Samantha had earned full and partial scholarships to Drexel University and Rutgers, respectively, and aspired to practice international law. Samantha was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority. She studied abroad in Barcelona and visited Madrid and Paris during her time in South Carolina. Samantha was described as amazingly beautiful with a wonderful smile. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg, and the couple was very close, staying in constant contact through texting and calling. They had plans to start a future together, even when Samantha was going to be attending law school. Greg was going to move in with her and support her. Everything seemed to be going well until Friday, March 29, 2019, when she never returned to her apartment, and things took a turn for the worse for Samantha. On the evening of March 28, 2019, Samantha planned to go out with her roommate and some friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Her boyfriend, Greg, was supposed to join them as well, but he was back in his hometown at the time. Still, he told her to go out and have fun without him. Samantha was feeling gloomy after hearing about a family member's illness, and what she needed was to distract herself a bit, and going out with friends was the perfect opportunity to lift her spirits. The group met up and went to a few different bars before finally settling at a bar known as the Bird Dog Bar, which was located in an area called 5 Points, a popular spot for students to hang out. Even though Samantha was enjoying herself with her friends, she continuously texted her boyfriend, Greg, pleading with him to make a 2-hour drive to visit her in Columbia because she needed emotional support. The couple had already made plans to see each other the following weekend, so her boyfriend never changed his mind and decided to stay where he was, but he still kept in constant communication with her. At around 2 a.m., Samantha decided to return to her apartment alone. She called an Uber, a popular ride-sharing service, using a mobile app, as this was a common practice among her and her peers. On that occasion, fate would lead her into the hands of a murderer. While Samantha waited for the Uber, she had one last phone conversation with Greg at around 2:04 a.m. Samantha told him she was going home and had taken an Uber. This was a routine she had followed many times before, using Uber to get to and from the bars, as the distance was too far to walk. A few minutes after placing the request with an Uber, a car pulled up to the curb where Samantha and a group of other weary bar customers were waiting for lifts. Security cameras captured her approaching the car, only to realize that the driver was there for someone else. After doing an about-face, she is seen retreating to her spot on the sidewalk. Samantha was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After some time, a black Chevrolet Impala, driven by a man who was later identified as Nathaniel David Rowland, pulled up into the space in front of her. Samantha said goodbye to Greg, and she opened the door and exchanged a quick word with the person behind the wheel before climbing into the back seat. Once she was inside the car, it sped off away. Within a short time, the Uber that Samantha had ordered arrived at the designated pickup location. From that point in time, no one other than the 21-year-old political science major student and the man driving the Impala knew that she had gotten into the wrong car. The CCTV footage would later show that the black Chevrolet Impala circled the area numerous times before targeting Samantha. Anyone who has ever spent time in 5 Points was aware that college students gathered in the streets after the bars closed to wait for their rides, and watching him drive around the area suggested that he knew exactly what he was doing that night. Samantha's boyfriend, Greg, used the Find My Friends app on her phone to track her movements and ensure she got home safely that night. However, he noticed that she was traveling in the opposite direction from her apartment. At first, he thought she might be going to a friend's house, but when he later texted her to check if she was okay, he received no response. He then tried calling her, but she did not answer her phone. Greg tried texting Samantha several more times, but noticed that his messages were delivered but not read, indicating that she never read any of them. Later, her phone location stopped sharing, which shocked Greg, as it had never happened before. Greg later thought that Samantha might have misplaced her phone in the Uber, but still decided to call her friends and roommate to find out if they had heard from her, or if she had made it home. Unfortunately, nobody had heard from her or seen her. Greg hoped she would turn up in the morning and tried to get some sleep. The following day in the morning, Samantha was not present. Her roommates were worried about her location and reported her as missing. Her boyfriend Greg also drove for 2 hours from Columbia to help search for her. A little over 3 to 4 hours after the missing person report was filed, the dead body of a young woman, later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson, was found by a group of turkey hunters in a wooded area in New Zion, about 65 miles away from Five Points. Less than 24 hours after she was last seen on surveillance video getting into a black car. Shocked by the gruesome discovery, the hunters immediately called 911, and representatives from the local sheriff's office were promptly dispatched to the scene. After an autopsy was performed, it became clear that Samantha was the victim of a violent attack. Her body had more than 120 separate stab wounds, with injuries to her face, head, neck, hands, upper body, legs, and feet. It was also determined that her fingernails were hacked to pieces as she tried to shield herself from the razor-sharp tool used to attack her. The evidence suggests that she was stabbed with a double-bladed knife and then dragged to the woods. The autopsy revealed the extent of her blood loss, as her body only contained 20 milliliters of blood compared to the typical 4 L in the human body. Investigators were dumbfounded by the sheer brutality of the crime. The investigation revealed that Samantha had accidentally gotten into the wrong car, thinking it was her Uber. The Uber driver she had called was seen arriving shortly after, but when he found she was not there, he cancelled the trip and left. It is likely that the car she was in was not the Uber, as she was murdered soon after. Investigators believe the driver used the child-proof locks to trap her inside, as the doors could only be opened from the outside. The description of the car, a black Chevrolet Impala, was quickly released to the public in the hopes of finding the perpetrator before he struck again. Fortunately, the car was spotted by officers on routine patrol a few days later, and the driver, Nathaniel Rowland, was arrested after a short chase. A search of Rowland's car revealed a child's car seat, surrounded by what seemed to be bloodstains. There were also large quantities of blood on the passenger seat and in the trunk. Samantha's cell phone was also found in the car, and it was discovered that Rowland had tried to sell it to a pawn shop earlier that day. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Rowland continuously denied any knowledge of Samantha's kidnapping and murder. A physical examination revealed traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails, but none of his DNA was found on her. Detectives speculated that Samantha was the victim of a sudden and violent attack, and the activated child-proof locks in the car suggest that Rowland trapped her inside as soon as she got in, leaving her helpless as he stabbed her repeatedly with a double-bladed knife. She was caught unawares by the ferocious attack and had to put a lot of effort into trying to defend herself, which would account for the multiple stab wounds found on her hands, as well as the condition of her mangled fingernails. Considering the excessive force that was used against her, it's understandable that Samantha was not able to scratch her attacker, which would have left his skin cells under her nails after the dreadful act was done. Rowland drove to a farmer's access road in New Zion, where only a local would have known it existed, and dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. After arriving back home, Rowland spent much of the day posting on social media as if nothing had happened, since he lived there nearly all of his life, and his residence was only minutes away from where the remains were found. That was 2 more strong pieces of evidence that pointed fingers to him as the killer. A peek into Rowland's background revealed that he was a devout churchgoer who had attended South Carolina State University in 2017, although there are no records of him graduating. It's unclear what he was doing for employment at the time. Rowland had one past felony arrest from October 2018 for obtaining a signature or property under false pretenses. There was also a woman who was carjacked by two men, one of them being Rowland. They assaulted her and forced her to drive to an ATM where they took her money. They then forced her to drive home, where they robbed her of even more of her belongings, including a PlayStation 4. Rowland was never convicted of robbing the woman, but he did sell some of her stolen belongings, including the PlayStation 4. When detectives obtained a search warrant for the apartment of his girlfriend, named Maria Howard, in New Zion, where he lived, they combed the trash bins behind the apartment and found a sock and bandana, allegedly belonging to Rowland, that were heavily stained with Samantha's blood. The detectives also found a white sheet with blood on it, a roll of duct tape, bleach wipes with blood on them, and a two-bladed knife that seemed to have blood on it. Tests would later confirm that the blood found on the two-bladed knife, as well as blood found on the sheets, in the car, and on the bleach wipes, was a match for Samantha Josephson. With the evidence against him mounting swiftly, Rowland was initially charged with possessing a weapon during a violent crime, the kidnapping, and the murder of Samantha Josephson. The trial would be grueling for the family, with Nathaniel Rowland pleading not guilty, claiming he was innocent, even with the mountain of evidence against him. When the trial began in the summer of 2021, Rowland's defense team argued that their client was an innocent man, based largely on the fact that his DNA had not been found on his alleged victim. On the other hand, prosecutors countered the defendant's claims of innocence with the undeniable amount of evidence that was collected in the case, amid the proof they put forward, which included the CCTV footage showing his car picking Samantha up in 5 points and driving away, the quarts of her blood that were found in his car, her bloody footprint on the vehicle's back window, allegations that he tried to use her bank card at an ATM after disposing of her body, cell phone trackers that placed their devices in the same place at the time of the murder, and the fact that he lived near where her remains were discovered. A handwriting expert was also brought in to compare Rowland's handwriting to a list that was written on a piece of paper found in his home, on which it was written, duct tape, tape her whole body, gloves, all black, flip phone, gasoline, matches. The expert testified that it was most likely that Rowland wrote the list, which sounded as if it was a plan for the dreadful act. The prosecutors called 31 witnesses to testify, including someone who witnessed Rowland cleaning the weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he tried to sell Samantha's cell phone, and his ex-girlfriend, who claimed her daughter had blood on her shoe after being in Rowland's car following the murder. Rowland did not call any witnesses, and none of his family members testified on his behalf, yet he continued to assert his innocence and pleaded with the judge. The jury reached a guilty verdict in just 1 hour, and Nathaniel Rowland was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In the wake of Samantha's murder, her parents, Seymour and Marcy Josephson, took it upon themselves to ensure that no one else suffered the same fate as their beloved daughter. To achieve this, they started the What's My Name Foundation, which encourages people of all ages to ask rideshare drivers to identify them by name before entering a stranger's vehicle. The Josephsons also advocated for a safety protocol they call SAMI, which stands for Stop, Ask, Match, and Inform. Additionally, in the aftermath of Samantha's tragedy, the rideshare industry implemented measures to protect both drivers and passengers, such as the issuance of a personalized 4-digit code that riders could use to confirm through the app that they were getting into the correct car. Samantha Lee Josephson's untimely death sent shockwaves through the hearts of her family and friends. The pain they bear is immeasurable, a testament to the bright light that Samantha was in their lives. Her story is a stark reminder that tragedy can strike unexpectedly. May her memory inspire us to be vigilant, look out for one another, and work collectively toward creating a world where safety and compassion prevail. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The incredible case of Michelle Whitaker. Michelle Laurel Whitaker was born on August 16, 1969, as the fourth of 5 children to her parents. According to her mom, Laura Andrews, Michelle was extremely close to her entire family. However, this changed when they moved from Illinois to Gastonia, North Carolina. And Michelle's once happy demeanor began to fade. As she entered her teenage years, Michelle part-time as a waitress and was barely getting by. One evening in 1999, Michelle met a man named David after her shift ended, and he offered to give her a ride home. Michelle accepted, but soon regretted her decision. Instead of taking her home, David took her to a secluded area where he assaulted her and forced her into intimate contact. He was arrested a year later, pleaded guilty to assault and battery, and received an 8-year prison sentence. Just before she disappeared, Michelle was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. Michelle's parents decided it was time to take drastic measures. They contacted the police and asked them to hold Michelle in custody until a spot in a rehabilitation center became available. Although it was a difficult decision, her parents felt it was the only way to help Michelle in her situation. However, Michelle became extremely upset by this, and from that point on, her relationship with her mother significantly deteriorated. Unfortunately, Michelle was mistakenly released from jail without receiving the court-ordered treatment for her substance and alcohol abuse. On August 5, 2002, Michelle had an argument with her mother and stormed out of the house in a bad mood. 3 days later, the man she was staying with contacted her mother, Laura Andrews, to inform her that he couldn't find Michelle after they had had an argument. This is how Laura learned of her daughter's disappearance. Laura immediately sought help from a friend who worked at the local police station. But the police, familiar with Michelle's lifestyle, advised her to wait a little longer, assuring her that Michelle would likely show up on her own. However, 2 weeks passed and Michelle failed to return home. On August 21, 2002, Laura filed an official missing persons report, and local law enforcement began investigating Michelle Whitaker's disappearance. During their investigation, they discovered the last place Michelle was spotted, a truck stop. This information came from a local resident named Doug, who had met Michelle by chance on the street the day before she disappeared. Doug recounted that he had stopped his motorcycle outside a bar where Michelle was sitting and struck up a conversation with her. Michelle told him that she had had a fight with her boyfriend and he had thrown her out of the house. Later that evening, they visited 2 bars together, playing a few games of billiards at one of them. They then took a ride on Doug's motorcycle until dawn, after which they went to his house. Thus, it was revealed that Michelle Whitaker had spent her last evening visiting local bars, and Doug was the last person to have seen her alive. This made Doug the prime suspect in Michelle's disappearance. According to his testimony, Michelle had planned to go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, a resort city on the Atlantic coast, where she hoped to earn good money working in local bars and restaurants. Doug claimed that he dropped Michelle off at a truck stop, but only after giving her some clothes, including a t-shirt and shorts, and some money to buy coffee and newspapers. He said he wished her good luck before leaving. To verify Doug's story, the police gave him a lie detector test, which he passed. They also tested the man Michelle had been staying with before she vanished, but found no evidence to suggest he was involved in her disappearance. The police began to consider the possibility that Michelle had actually gone to Myrtle Beach, which is approximately 250 miles from Spartanburg. A few more weeks went by, but there was still no sign of Michelle. Her family and friends were growing increasingly anxious. Despite her anger and resentment towards her parents, They couldn't bring themselves to believe she would abandon her family and go into hiding. Michelle's prolonged disappearance made the local sheriff question her motives. When people travel for extended periods, they typically take some personal belongings with them, but Michelle had left with almost nothing. Moreover, she had a beloved pet dog to which she was deeply attached. Every detective interviewed agreed that Michelle would never willingly abandon her dog. In the meantime, Michelle's parents began driving around the neighborhood, hoping to find any clue that might lead them to their daughter. After receiving multiple tips that Michelle had been spotted on a beach in North Carolina, they headed there immediately. They spent 3 days searching for her, posting flyers and talking to locals, but their efforts ultimately proved fruitless. After 6 months of unsuccessful searches, Laura Andrews started questioning whether her behavior towards her daughter had been right. She had witnessed her daughter's downward spiral and couldn't just stand by. Laura wanted to protect her in any way possible. Additionally, she suspected that the 1999 brutal attack Michelle suffered might have contributed to her disappearance. Laura couldn't forgive herself for the hurtful words she spoke to Michelle after the attack, despite the assault being a terrible act by a stranger. Laura initially blamed Michelle for taking a destructive path and causing harm to herself, which only damaged Michelle's self-esteem further with her words. From the sheriff's office, it was assumed Michelle had motives to escape due to her reputation. Detectives thought she'd eventually be arrested, but a year passed with no results. The police were alarmed that Michelle left no digital traces, which wasn't a good sign. Both police and family wondered if Michelle was a crime victim, possibly falling prey to a truck driver, but this theory remained unsubstantiated. 2 more years passed with no leads. On the 3rd anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, after police and Laura Andrews visited the truck stop where Michelle was last seen, local TV stations revisited the story. Just days after Michelle's story aired on TV news, the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office received a strange letter. The anonymous letter, handwritten on a small sheet of paper, claimed to reveal the location of Michelle Whitaker's body. A crude, homemade map accompanied the letter, pinpointing the exact spot. Despite its amateurish appearance, the letter was well written and proper, lending it an air of credibility. The sheriff, accompanied by search dogs, embarked on a search of a rural area 25 miles from where Michelle was last seen. This development came 3 years after her disappearance, and her family was torn between despair and hope. Some had reluctantly accepted that Michelle might be dead, while others clung to the possibility that she was alive and safe. The search dogs were unable to detect any scent, and the operation was eventually called off. Although relieved that no body was found, the investigators remained perplexed by the letter. A handwriting analysis and DNA evidence from the envelope suggested that the author was a woman, but her identity remained unknown. In 2006, Michelle's parents relocated to Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is 65 miles from Spartanburg. A year later, on the 5th anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, the whole family gathered at the church. Michelle's mother, Laura Andrews, did not want to treat the gathering as a memorial service because Michelle's body had not been found, and there was still a faint hope that she might be alive. Another year passed, and Detective William Gary took over the investigation of Michelle's disappearance. At the time, he was handling a dozen unsolved cases, including Michelle's. Since many years had gone by without any evidence that Michelle was still alive, her case was considered a felony. The lack of evidence led the investigators to believe that something tragic had likely occurred. As the 6th anniversary of Michelle's this time, although the news was welcome, a family reunion was not possible at this point.